Part 16. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Hui-Xiang. Chapter 156. Amamiyamai was silent. If Asahi Kazuma had desires, she might be able to use what he wanted to seduce him, but this guy has no desires now, or in other words, his current desire is to see a river of blood. After understanding this, Amamiyamai knew that there was nothing that could threaten him. She gritted her teeth until her lips were bitten, and said bitterly, "If you want to, just do it, don't talk nonsense." Asahi Kazuma smiled, took out a bell from somewhere, and hung the collar directly on Amamiyamai. Tonight he wanted to see if it was the bell that rang or her scream. Just as Amamiyamai was about to kick her forward, Asahi Kazuma directly restricted her movements with one hand. "I'm quite surprised," Asahi Kazuma said in a low voice. "I discovered just now that your genetic talent consumes more than I thought. Amamiya-san, you seem to be too nervous and have neglected your physical consumption. Here, compared to when you were struggling just now, you are a little weaker now." Amamiyamai couldn't help but be shocked by this man's shamelessness. "Are you crazy? You've already locked me up and you're still so careful. It's always good to be alert. I'm waiting for you to run out of strength. What are you waiting for? Are you going to let me do whatever I want after you end the overclocking mode?" Amamiyamai's movements became weaker and weaker. At first, when her power exploded, she could still press Asahi Kazuma with the sudden surge of strength. But now, Asahi Kazuma does not need to use her thighs and can directly press with one hand. Amamiyamai's kick is gone. 10 points of physical strength, so terrifying. Asahi Kazuma had already begun to think about whether he should laugh. GGG. Being a villain once in a while is really something special. So, the night passed. Omit 10,000 words. The temperature has dropped a bit today. The temperature outside is more than 10 degrees, but it's 36 degrees here with my Amamiya. You once saw the female bodhisattva on Little Blue Bird saying, "What enters the body at midnight is not necessarily sleepiness. What shines on your face in the morning is not necessarily sunshine." Wake up from a night's dream, you leave the secret room refreshed. This place is relatively remote, with a winding tree-lined path behind you. After walking on this winding road for a long time, you are a little tired and ready to leave, and then you realize that under your feet the weeds are overgrown, and at this midnight and early morning hour, they are already covered with the white frost of early autumn. You can't help but feel that the scenery is so beautiful. At this point you know that you have made a big mistake, but now you want to struggle a little longer, at least not to be approached by the Genji group so easily. You made a choice after much thought and decided to take some necessary techniques to delay discovery. You chose. Today you are King Joe, don't talk about delaying time, you just want Daji under you to raise her head and call you the king. Further clean up the traces at the scene and delay the time for Genji to follow the clues to find you. Turn around and go back day and night, leaving her delirious and asking her to tell the truth. Free simulation. In the simulation space, Qian Yufengjian tasted it carefully for a while, and after chewing it slowly, a subtle look appeared on his face. This love simulation is so realistic. Is this the fall line? The development direction of the love simulation that Asahi Kazuma has experienced before is more serious, including when kissing with Rina and Aman during the love simulation process. There will be a hazy feeling like a flower in a moon mirror. To put it simply, the feelings are not clear. However, the fall is different, the memory, the scene, the unfolding, the operation. Tisk tisk tisk, it can only be said that it is not generally true. He almost believed it, thinking that he was really doing this and that with Amamiyamai. The funniest thing is that during this process, Asahi Kazuma never took off Amamiyamai's blindfold. Asahi Kazuma has very good physical strength, but Amamiyamai can't even see her. All the sensations in her body are basically focused on touch, hearing, and smell. As for why I don't have the sense of taste? Asaba Kazuma looked at Amamyamai gnashing her teeth and wanting to kill him. If she really wanted to do something that could make her feel the taste, she might even tear off the flesh. How to put it this way, although Asahi Kazuma had a premonition that the fall line was really depraved, he did not expect that it would really fall from the beginning to the end. Even the options are all kinds of small life operations. However, Asahi Kazuma feels that she is quite used to this feeling. Although it sounds very immoral, sometimes she lets go of her inner sense of morality, and the happiness she gets really increases exponentially. Through this incident, Asaba Kazuma became more certain about one thing. The purpose of Kyunulu, Love is War 2077 is definitely not serious. Whose serious gaming experience feels so real? In reality, Asaba Kazuma would not take action directly against Amamyamai due to various considerations. He has no interest in challenging a late-stage boss like the Consortium before his power becomes stronger. But as for games, it's good to get a taste of it first. You just need to exercise some restraint. This feeling is too easy to get addicted to. If you don't exercise restraint, Asahi Kazuma may not be able to quit her internet addiction. His eyes went beyond option. Asking Amamyamai to call him king is too simple, and mechanical repetition is meaningless. Option to clean up the traces. Is this for fear of being caught by the people sent by the Genji group to investigate if you are not at the scene? On the other hand, option, let Amamyamai reveal the truth day and night, maybe she can play some tricks. Oh my god, did you know that Asaba Kazuma was still trying to figure out how to make the right choice even when he was in a state of endless aftertaste? It can only be said that the Genji group could not find any trace of Amamyamai after that. Not unfair either. After all, he was really too cautious. Kinyo Kazuma thought for a moment, and a playful smile flashed in his eyes. He doesn't mind trying out Amamyamai's love simulation. Anyway, he didn't have that emotional foundation, and he was even tricked by her. Although he didn't care that much, but... well, he really still cares. He wouldn't be so bothered if his future career hit a wall, but if someone almost had his house stolen from him due to emotional problems, that would be extremely uncomfortable. And this option may still have a lot of room for manipulation. Choose. The simulation continued, and Asahi Kazuma's consciousness gradually sank into the simulated story. But Asahi Kazuma didn't notice that in the blank simulation space, dark red prompt windows were flashing. Warning, warning, players unlock the corruption line, which is restricted content for R18 and above, and turns on the underage protection mode. Unable to connect to the backend database, process response failed, underage protection failed to turn on. According to the relevant provisions of Japanese law, the sole selection target wants to sign a relevant agreement. With the consent of both parties in the game, the subsequent regulations will be activated and start sending messages. Unable to detect sole selection object background, warning, warning system error. Activate the second alternative regulation, increase the amount of information, and partially lift the number 1 game. The first rule of the game, before the love simulation is over, the love partner cannot synchronize the memory in advance, the rules are partially lifted. Warning, warning, it is detected that the love interest Maya has not rejected the host, the second alternative regulation is forcibly terminated. System error at #UN% #at. Start automatically matching relevant rules. New corruption line rules, law has no taboos. Both parties can directly synchronize their soul feelings, and the simulated memory will be postponed until the end of the love simulation. Location, a corner of the Genji residence in Tokyo. A look of discomfort appeared on Amamyamai's face while she was sleeping, and her body was twisting restlessly under the quilt. He was still making restless noises in his sleep. No, don't do this. I'm sorry, I don't dare anymore, I don't dare anymore. I'm not going to be tough anymore, don't touch me, no, you can't. After an imperceptible whisper, she suddenly woke up. She reluctantly got up, and after a moment she felt something was wrong. Amamayamai? She looked at the mess of pants with a confused look on her face, not understanding why it was like this. She only vaguely remembered that she seemed to have had a dream, and she seemed to have experienced some interesting things in the dream. She instinctively felt that she should not like those things. But if you ask her to tell you what she doesn't like, she feels like she's looking at the moon in the mirror and can't tell you at all. But I'm sure this is not a serious dream, otherwise it wouldn't be like this. She was a little embarrassed and went to take a bath, and changed into a set of pajamas. Looking at the wet blue and white vagina on the sink, she hesitated. Speaking of which, I haven't washed my own clothes for a long time since my mother passed away. Not to mention, my mother used to worry that she wouldn't be able to clean clothes like this because she was young, so she would just wash them for her. A trace of confusion flashed in Amamayamai's eyes. In the dead of night, the huge Genji villa has a lot of Genji family members and maids living here, but it makes people feel more chilled than living alone. I didn't expect that after so many years, I would be in a situation where I need to do my own laundry again. As for asking the maid from home to wash. Just kidding, if someone sees any traces left behind, even Genji won't be able to shut these people's mouths. After all, it is different from the past era where the servants had the power of life and death. Even those ancient families now have to take the initiative to maintain the bottom line. It is difficult to disconnect from the mainstream of the world. It will easily affect their reputation and may even affect the efficiency of making money. Although being shameless is the easiest way to make money, sometimes when shamelessness reaches a certain level, the upper limit of how much money can be earned will drop. Asan is the most typical example. So if Genji really wants to silence someone now, he will have to pay a price. Not to mention that she was not the head of the Genji family, so the price to pay would be even greater. You can't spend your life just to block the news that Amamayamai was in a mess when she woke up internally. If so, she chooses to hand wash it herself. When the time comes, subordinates will smell. Oh no, how dare your subordinates ask the reason? As long as there is no evidence, even if they have speculations, they can only hold it in. She never expected that she would have such a dream, but not to mention, although the dream may not be so beautiful, the happiness in the dream is really. She looked at the floor-to-ceiling mirror, gently holding her beautiful face with both hands, and after a moment, she regained her weak look. Are you kidding? I am Amamayamai. To have such a dream can only be due to the influence of physiological factors during adolescence. It cannot be, it cannot be. As she spoke, she felt like her body was beginning to reminisce again. That feeling was so real that she clearly couldn't remember what happened in the dream, but there was still a kind of happiness that transcended the dream and remained in her body. I don't know which bastard will benefit from this body in the end, but it is absolutely impossible for me to get married before I become the head of the family. Amamayamai's eyes became firm. Soon, she finished washing her clothes, and then her eyes glanced at the trash can nearby. Amamayamai's eyes were a little blank. What on earth am I doing? Can't I just throw it away as trash? Why do I have to wash it? She was troubled. She didn't know why, but she always felt that after waking up in the middle of the night, her whole brain seemed to have become a lot slower. It's like she's using overclocking mode at full blast. Are you kidding? If I use overclocking mode with all my firepower, and I have to beg others not to die after one punch, how many people can block my punch? Her pride comes from her extreme self-discipline and self-learning awareness over the years. Later, after the void gene awakened, she became even more powerful. The overclocking of her body allows her to break the upper limits of her own strength and speed in a short period of time. Coupled with the fighting skills learned from famous teachers, she can easily step on a boxing champion who has practiced hard for many years and make people unable to move. Achieving self-breakthroughs in learning speed in overclocking mode allows her to blossom more in all walks of life that she is good at. If you give her a little more time, it is not impossible to become a hexagon player. All of this created a source of pride for the individual named Amamiya Mai. How could she be suppressed by an ordinary human male? Impossible, absolutely impossible. Lie down and sleep, and wake up to another beautiful day tomorrow. Meanwhile, in a love simulator, Asahi Kazuma was feeling unbridled happiness as the scene unfolded. No, don't come again. Amamiya Mai felt like she was almost dehydrated. This animal came out of nowhere. Why did she feel that this guy's physical energy was exhausted, just like a restless little cowboy? If you don't tell me, you'll continue to be dehydrated today. I said, go away, go away. Amamiya Mai let out bursts of mourning. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 157. Amamiya Mai's screams could only be heard by Asahi Kazuma. After completely quitting being a human being, Asahi Kazuma really gained some insight. When the morning passed and teacher Haruna Hayakawa from the school called to inquire about his situation, Asahi Kazuma walked out of the basement first and then answered the phone, barely getting over it. Returning to the basement again, Asahi Kazuma took off Amamiya Mai's blindfold, looked at her with a dazed look in her eyes and said, "How do you feel, Amamiya-san?" Amamiya Mai only felt her throat hurt, didn't want to speak, and turned her head away from looking at her. Quite stubborn, which is in line with my understanding of Amamiya-san. Asahi Kazuma chuckled, and Amamiya Mai's body trembled subconsciously as if she had a PTSD reaction. It looks like I did a good job. Kinya Kazuma reached out his hand and lifted her chin. It seemed that Amamiya Mai now knew how to cooperate. If it had been the same as yesterday, she would have opened her mouth and bit his finger. How could Asahi Kazuma let Asahi Kazuma wantonly with her face so numb? Her head cocked. "What do you want to do?" she said with dead eyes. "Tell me, what is Genji's main job, what areas do you plan to develop in the future, what role do you play in it, and who are the people who are closely related to you? Why are you asking these questions? Do you want to tell me?" Seeing that she wanted to be silent, Asahi Kazuma directly pressed her on the test table. His narrow fox-like eyes repeated maliciously, "Do you want to tell me?" Amamiya Mai raised her head and held back the sound she wanted to make. "It's so weird, it doesn't matter when you wear a blindfold." Amamiya Mai's mood was in a mess. She didn't understand why she could remain calm for a while when she was wearing the blindfold before, but now that he took off the blindfold and started to feel excited again, she felt like a broken boat rocking on the lake. The swaying stars. When he came back to his senses, he finally realized that those were not stars at all, but the eyes of a villain. This kind of rotten person can also have a pair of beautiful eyes. Such an idea suddenly came to her mind. Although he hated Asahi Kazuma from the bottom of his heart, his body could not lie, and the fear in his heart could not lie. She was really scared. In the end, Amamiya Mai sighed and briefly talked to Asahi Kazuma about the situation of the Genji group, but she didn't say much about her own situation. Asahi Kazuma thought for a moment, and a bright smile appeared on his indifferent face looking at Amamiya Mai. He gently touched Amamiya Mai's forehead. "You are much better behaved and cuter now than before." Amamiya Mai turned her head disdainfully. Is she being good? She temporarily accepted the reality that she had been controlled, and then chose a relatively less vulnerable way to protect herself. Of course, her emotions were well hidden. Even when he tilted his head, he looked like he was scared. The deep disdain was relatively well hidden. However, because she was imprisoned for one night, she was now starting to feel a little trance-like. At this time, she suddenly heard Kinya Kazuma say, "By the way, did I tell you one thing?" I actually did write it down in your address book. After Asaba Kazuma said this, Amamiyamai, whose eyes were a little dull, suddenly raised her head. What do you want to do? She said hoarsely. How about you guess? Kinya Kazuma closed her blindfold again. Amamiyamai was silent for a moment, and her body suddenly began to tremble. No, don't. The sound of the basement door slowly closing was so harsh in this room. Amamiyamai's voice was trembling so much that she almost cried. This feeling of being deprived of vision really made her uneasy. A little bit of fear would quickly spread like an infection. Do not go. There was sadness in her voice. She was really scared. There was even a moment when she had an idea. Instead of being blindfolded and locked up here like this, it's better to let him move as he pleases. However, Asahi Kazuma didn't consider her feelings at all. He is serious about playing games. Since it's a game, let's just play. His purpose never changes. Location, a new location away from the basement room. Asaba Kazuma first dialed a phone number marked Minamoto's AI. In Heian's previous love simulation, he had a relationship with the head of the Genji family before being frozen. Before hiding Amamiyamai's cell phone, he had written down the phone numbers that were noted in it. Most of them, Amamiyamai didn't make notes, which saved him a lot of effort. Although she didn't know whether she asked people around her to remember the phone numbers of ordinary work partners, or how she did it separately. But this at least means that the identities of those people who made notes on her phone are relatively special. These are the people who were personally selected by Amamiyamai and who need special notes. Taking into account Amamiyamai's family background, this address book list can be regarded as a list of the tip of the iceberg in Tokyo's high-level circles. Among them, the head of the family, Unzai, was among them. Asaba Kazuma took out a mobile phone. This was an anonymous mobile phone card and phone number that he had obtained from someone in advance before kidnapping Maya Amamiya. Being cautious, he even emphasized that you cannot use today's smartphones, but the old flip phones from the Nokia era. Without him, avoid the failure of his plan due to additional factors. Although he didn't think that Japan's Ami Daddy's chaebols would obediently help because of their relationship with Japan's local chaebols, he couldn't bet on this possibility. Asayu Kazuma pinched her throat with her fingers and coughed lightly. His voice began to undergo some subtle changes. Becoming softer, more feminine. Once, twice, 3 times. With an absolute sense of pitch, he consciously moved his throat to make his voice closer to the timbre in his memory. It can only be said that nerve reflex enhancement is quite outrageous. It not only provides him with nerve reflex speeds that are beyond the comprehension of normal people, but also enhances his control of his own muscles to a considerable extent. Now Asahi Kazuma can even consciously control the muscles in some areas of the body to achieve his own goals and effects. This is all the result of in-depth development of genetic talents. Asaba Kazuma is probably the person in the world who knows the most about these talents. There is no other way. He has come into contact with many kinds of talents, so he can naturally draw parallels. Not to mention the talent of extreme knowledge, which makes his knowledge in various fields wider and wider. This gap is the same as that of Magneto. Magneto, who has never studied physics properly, makes scientists cry when he sees the tricks he plays over and over again. But if he really knows where to develop his abilities, then there is nothing wrong with Professor X. The method of adjusting muscle groups to allow one to break through the upper limit of one's physical fitness in a short period of time was a method that Asaba Kazuma had just developed recently. It is equivalent to a weaker overclocking mode. Amamiyamai lost without complaining. 10 points of physical strength also comes with additional bonuses. It is strange that she can overturn Asahi Kazuma. It took Asaba Kazuma half an hour to adjust the timbre that perfectly matched the voice of Amamiyamai in his memory. When he opened his mouth again, if Amamiyamai was standing next to him, she would probably be horrified to find that when this guy opened his mouth to speak, If he covered his eyes, his voice would really be worse than Amamyami's. Not to mention, Asaba Kazuma is probably the person most likely to have seen Amamyami's voice in various states. Even her relatives would not be able to hear the swan cry of Amamyami's tears. It's not wrong to say I know her better than you do. Well, this is true whether it is the concept of timbre, body, or taste. It wasn't until he adjusted to this level that he smiled and directly called Unzai on an anonymous phone. The call was answered not long after the call was made. I am Minamoto Zaidashi, who are you? Asaba Kazuma deliberately remained silent for a while, and then said in Amamyami's voice, Father, it's me. The other end of the phone was stunned for a moment. After a while, Minamoto Zaidashi said calmly, what happened? I heard from the bodyguard that you were being hunted. Well, I don't know who did it, but, it's most likely a family member. Asaba Kazuma imitated the casual speaking attitude of Amamyami and whispered, after all, besides family members, I can't imagine anyone having the courage to attack me directly and openly. When Asaba Kazuma said this, a drop of cold sweat flowed down. In fact, when he targeted Amamyami at the beginning, he used many methods. Even the location for the ambush was chosen in advance. Even though Kinya Kazuma had just come out of the small business supermarket at that time, he thought he would be easily exposed. In fact, the small business supermarket went out of business yesterday. Asaba Kazuma did everything in the corruption line. He directly asked the closed supermarket to take the initiative to open the door, and quietly destroyed the surveillance camera, and then directly simulated Asaba Kazuma just bought it at the door. The attitude of things come out of the Shang dynasty. The purpose was to make Amamyami lower her guard. This girl's fighting skills are already mastered. If she really treats others as idiots, she might become an idiot first. But he didn't expect that even after he used this method to dispel Amamyami's suspicion, after he helped Amamyami subdue the gangster, she would immediately take action against him. It seems that the layout is not careful enough. In other words, he underestimated Amamyami's alertness. Fortunately, Amamyami is not a god. Although she doubted her situation at that time, he still helped her in the end, so when she took action, it was more of testing in a state of hesitation. Try to see if there is any connection between yourself and the group of people who kidnapped her. Fortunately, she guessed correctly, Asaba Kazuma was really the mastermind. Unfortunately, if you hesitate, you will lose. With just such a little hesitation and not taking action with all his strength, Asaba Kazuma took it as a success and was overpowered directly against Asaba Kazuma, who was calculating mentally but not intentionally. Now she is using her voice directly to talk to her father. It can only be said that no normal person would have thought of this operation by Asaba Kazuma. Unzai's voice on the other end of the phone was very low. Is it related to the family? It's really possible. After all, if you continue to develop smoothly like this, it has nothing to do with others. Moreover, your style has been quite extreme since you were a child. Some people in your family are indeed worried that you will affect them after you take over. Kinya Kazuma thought for a moment, and carefully replied using the words he had prepared before. That's why I didn't go back immediately yesterday. I didn't want to use my life to provoke those dirty guys. You should clean up those guys who don't follow the basic rules as soon as possible. Is this why you are calling me with an anonymous phone card now? Genzayashi said calmly. Qian Yufengjian called him good guy. It had only been a few minutes since he had been on the phone with Genzai, but the head of the Genji family had already used his power to investigate and found out that the phone card of Asaba Kazuma was an anonymous phone card. Fortunately, I prepared my words for this matter in advance. The proud voice of Amamaya came out of Asaba Kazuma's mouth. Not to mention, the clear voice was quite nice, but it was more interesting when there was no bell ringing. I won't leave any chance to my opponent. Father, I don't trust my family. If I really want to go back through my family's channels as soon as possible, I'm afraid that my life will be lost. So, let me be quiet first and wait for me. Through my own channels, I confirmed that there is no problem and you will be able to see me soon. Unzai on the other end of the phone said, "Okay, then you should try to pay attention to safety. By the way, the Void Gene Project team has recently borrowed resources from Genji Medical to further develop the plan. You are the leader. If so, try to pay more attention to it. I don't know why, but the number of Void Gene owners seems to have increased slightly in recent years." Kinya Kazuma frowned. Although the leader of Genji Medical Care was indeed Amamiyamai, he really didn't expect that Amamiyamai would have terminated Genji Medical Care so early. He thought for a moment and decided that these words were a temptation. Judging from Yuan's understanding of Amamiyamai in his simulation, Amamiyamai at that time looked more like a witness. Even the contact and docking methods left behind were not as good as those from Genji Medical. Contact information. In other words, all she could promise at that time was the help of the head of the Genji family. Some people may say that the help of the Genji family head should not be more valuable than Genji's medical treatment. Why does Asaba Kazuma think that Amamiyamai did not master Genji medicine at that time? That's of course because... Father, don't be ridiculous. I have never had a say in Genji medical care. You are the only one I can barely rely on, Asaba Kazuma said calmly. Maybe father, you are planning to let me intervene in Genji medical care. It looks like it's not a disguise, Unzai sighed. Don't worry about Yuanji Medical, there are arrangements there now. What if I say I really want it? It's useless to want it, and it's impossible for Genji to give you this, let alone, you are not my daughter, who are you anyway? Kinya Fengjian broke into cold sweat. It shouldn't be. According to UMI's simulation, Asaba Kazuma was certain that Amamiyamai had no say in Genji's medical treatment. At that time, he had the most frequent contacts with Genji Medical. If Amamiyamai wanted to repay his favor by timely informing Tatsuo Fujiki that he was conducting experiments without telling Genji, she would have just given the contact information to Genji Medical. Asaba Kazuma didn't think that the help he gave Genji at that time was worthy of Amamiyamai directly giving the contact information of the head of the Minamoto family. That's why he concluded that at that time, Amamiyamai had no grasp of Genji's medical treatment. Because I had no control, I couldn't make a promise, and in the end I could only use Unzai's side as a bargaining chip to repay the favor. This was Asaba Kazuma's judgment. He firmly believed that his judgment was correct, so he decisively said, "Father, stop making trouble. I'm tired of being chased. It is true that Genji Medical is not under your control, and the relevant questions you answered are basically flawless, but you overlooked one thing, Mai basically doesn't call me father. You call her too many times." The voice on the other end of the phone was a little cold and solemn. Kinya Kazuma narrowed his eyes and suddenly laughed. Minamoto Zai, you two, father and daughter, are really all scheming. Fortunately, I also made third-hand preparations. Asaba Kazuma still used the voice of Mai Amamiya, and said with a helpless smile, as expected of the head of the Genji family, I originally thought I could hide it more, after all, she is really not ready yet. Oh? She's not in danger. Asaba Kazuma's voice was a little weird. If there was really a danger, I wouldn't call her for her. After all, she is indeed guarding against someone, although, she is not willing to tell me who it is. It's just that I did talk too much today, and Mr. Genzayashi, you noticed something was wrong. She'll be fine. Of course nothing will happen, or do you want me to deal with her directly, Mr. UN? Of course not. I'll ask you to take more care of her first. I know she has some opinions in her heart, but I don't think her family will take action against her. But what if we take action? Kinya Kazuma asked. Then I will make the disobedient people behave a little better. I am the head of the UN family. Then I will take good care of her. Asaba Kazuma hung up the phone. After a moment, he quickly disposed of the phone. He pursed his lips, then finally burst into laughter. Interesting, so interesting, Amamiya-san, you are really cautious, and so is your father. It's not easy to fool you. Your father is much smarter than I thought. It's a pity. Who told you that the target I want to deceive is Mr. UN? Mr. Zaidashi Minamoto, you have fallen into my trap. No matter how old a fox you are, I am still more skilled. It looks like this simulation will last for a long, long time. Kinya Kazuma couldn't help but feel unhappy with him. Because he knew that his opponent on the chessboard, Amamiya, had already been checked by him. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. We've traveled through Tokyo. Who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huaxiang. Chapter 158. He took his mobile phone, turned back to the house, and directly exported the audio uploaded to the mobile phone again. After a while, he finished editing the audio, sent the edited audio back to his mobile phone, and then turned and walked towards the basement. When the basement door was opened, Amamiya-mai's body trembled slightly, but she soon calmed down. At least there was someone to talk to her, so she wouldn't be so flustered. Being in a dark room can really hurt someone's spirit, not to mention that she has been frightened for so long and is mentally and physically exhausted. It's better to let him continue than to do this. You, don't leave me here alone, okay? Amamiya-mai said weakly. Kinya Kazuma said with a smile, why, it's only been a few times and you already miss me. No, it's just that the basement is too quiet, she whispered, and when she raised her head to reveal her beautiful face, she couldn't see anything because she was wearing a blindfold, but she followed Kinha Kazuma's voice and looked at her. How about you come closer, even if, don't leave me alone. Then everyone knows what the content is that she is embarrassed to say. The confusion on his face had a slightly hazy beauty, and he was obviously already feeling haggard, but at this moment he gave off a sickly feeling. It makes Asahi Kazuma want to ravage her even more. That's weird. Asaba Kazuma took half a step back and avoided the kick from Amamiya-mai. This action was completely aimed at destroying him. You still have the strength to move your feet. I thought I could use up a little more of your energy. Amamiya was numb. How cautious must this man be? She was still in the state of the after effects of turning on the overclocking mode last night, and she felt that she didn't have much physical strength to resist for the time being, so she simply lay down and rested for a while, just to replenish her physical strength. Anyway, it seemed that he didn't want to kill her in the short term. Restore his physical strength first, then let him relax his guard, and finally find a way to fight back. How could there exist in this world a guy who clearly tortured a delicate girl like her until she seemed to have no ability to resist, and still had such a strong vigilance? Is he really a man? How can you be so careful? No, I should say, what exactly have you gone through and why are you so careful in doing things? Amamiya-mai is quite aware of her charm. She doesn't know how many people want to kiss her. Even if she takes off her shoes and stretches her feet towards them, there will definitely be a group of people licking her feet just to please her. She's just so confident. Of course, she couldn't really let people lick her feet, wouldn't it be disgusting? She had always believed that no one could resist the charm of such a delicate person, and she even took the initiative to flatter Asaba Kazuma in order to lower her vigilance. But I didn't expect to achieve this, and I couldn't help Yinkinyu Fengjian. Is it true that Amamiya-mai is afraid of the dark because she lost her eyesight? Real? Is it true that Amamiya-mai doesn't want Asaba Kazuma to leave her here alone? Real? Is it true that Amamiya thinks she feels more secure when using herself as a fitness equipment? Real? But It's true that Amamiyamai wants revenge on Asaba Kazuma. It's true that Amamiyamai actually has a way to remove her blindfold. It is true that after Amamiyamai subdued Asaba Kazuma, she could find props on him to unlock the door. Wanting to kill him directly in the basement, is also true. She realized that she had met someone who was as scheming as herself. Asaba Kazuma is planning to make her surrender and gain control of her, but Amamiyamai also wants to escape from here. Anyway, we have already lost, so we might as well see how to save ourselves. If you don't be cruel to yourself, how can you win this person's trust? How could you kill him? Although for a moment, she did waver, it can only be said that extreme beauty can indeed make people surrender sometimes. Even a determined person like her became a little confused after listening to his sweet words for a long time. Amamiyamai felt that her mind was confused and her thoughts were confused. Facts have proved that the counselor took the initiative to enter the game and tried to defeat Tianbanzi, but that was at the cost of his own morale. If she is not careful, she will suffer the consequences, let alone her failure. Asaba Kazuma smiled. In fact, Asaba Kazuma could not give her a chance from the beginning. Amamiyamai only saw his playful appearance, but did not know his execution and determination. If a normal person gets the golden finger of Kunyulu, Love is War 2077, they may have become the slaves of Kunyulu. They think about dark blue plus dots in everything and fast forward to the simple mode. Even if the fall line is turned on from the beginning, it is easy to understand. But Asaba Kazuma was not affected. Doesn't he face enough temptations in this game? At the earliest time, the school's English teacher even brought his daughter with him, but he mercilessly rejected him. Another example is Rina's simulation. In fact, Ishihara Rina's character is relatively soft and traditional. If he just wants to possess her, there is no need to consider her feelings, her inner mental state, her thoughts, and her future. Asaba Kazuma actually knows the original. There is a speed line hidden in the simulation line. Heian simulation is similar. With the help of system props, Asaba Kazuma has a chance to use her genetic talent to influence her in reverse. Doesn't he understand these operations? Gaslighting to dog whistle effect. These operations can be used on workers, and they can also be used on romantic partners, as long as you are good enough, there is no lower limit. But he didn't want to, let alone like it. With such restraint, he would not be easily deceived by Amamiyamai. One thing must be understood first. After all, Amamiyamai is a member of the Genji family. She comes from that kind of family. Even if she doesn't take the initiative to get involved, what she sees and hears can give them enough insights. Amamiyamai is not some stupid second generation, he doesn't believe she gives in so easily. So, he had to specially arrange a backup plan. Amamiyamai's futile struggle soon subsided. After not eating for a day, she turned on the overclocking mode again, and now she was a little dizzy. Asaba Kazuma whispered a devil's voice in Amamiyamai's ear, "Amamiya-san, are you interested in cooperating with me?" "Cooperate with NM." Kinya Kazuma smiled, "Unruly children will be punished." Asaba Kazuma took out a feather and stretched it to the solace of Amamiyamai's feet. Another 10 minutes passed, and Amamiyamai had no strength to speak anymore. Her whole body was scratched so much that her breathing was up and down. "Let's do something fun." "What do you want to do again?" There was not much fluctuation in Amamiyamai's voice. "Anyway, it's already like this, and it doesn't matter if it comes a few more times. Isn't this person just relying on his physical strength, good looks, and better figure to be like this? Yes, there is nothing to be afraid of. How about you guess who is speaking now?" A familiar Amamiyamai-like voice sounded. Amamiyamai raised her head in surprise. Why did she hear her own voice? "How about it, Amamiya-san, you should be able to hear the voice I imitated, it's quite similar to your voice." Asaba Kazuma murmured like a devil. Amamiyamai felt a little panicked. She couldn't figure out what Asahi Kazuma wanted to do. There must be something wrong with the information Amemiya-san passed before. As expected, you want me to be exposed to Genji's gaze and then find a way to save me, right? The voice that was almost identical to her own echoed in her ears, making Amamiyamai's scalp tingle. Suddenly, she heard a slight phone call. Her mind was in chaos, and she felt her body stiffen instantly. This bastard, are you crazy? Come down first. At this time, Asaba Kazuma was sitting next to Amamiyamai, and while Amamiyamai was struggling, she quietly turned on a cell phone recording. After a while, the phone made a ringing sound, which was so clearly visible in the dark basement. After a while, a voice that Amamiyamai had heard many times sounded. I am Minamoto Zadayoshi, who are you? Amamiyamai's body stopped, and then she began to struggle violently. Asaba Kazuma moved faster. He took out the black tape that he had prepared long ago and put it directly on Amamiyamai's mouth. She was unable to speak. Amamiyamai struggled like crazy, but her body was restricted and her mouth was blocked. What's even worse is that because Asaba Kazuma put the blindfold on her again, she couldn't even tell that it was just a recording. She painfully heard a conversation carefully arranged by Chienu Kazuma. Asaba Kazuma, the following imitates Amamiyamai's voice. Father, it's me. Minamoto Zai, what happened? I heard from the bodyguard that you were being hunted. Asaba Kazuma, well, I don't know who did it, but, it's most likely a family member. After all, other than family members, I can't imagine anyone having the courage to attack me directly and openly. Unzai, is it related to the family? It's really possible. After all, if you continue to develop smoothly like this, it has nothing to do with others. Moreover, your style has been quite extreme since you were a child. Some people in your family are indeed worried that you will affect them after you take over. Asaba Kazuma, that's why I didn't go back immediately yesterday. I didn't want to use my life to provoke the operations of those dirty guys. You should clean up those guys who don't follow the basic rules as soon as possible. How could Amamiyamai not realize what Asaba Kazuma was doing? Is this guy using his own voice to pretend to be himself to deceive Genji? No matter how many times, she was always shocked by Chienu Kazuma's madness. No, I have to discover his conspiracy no matter what. She didn't want to be locked up in a basement and die alone. Then she heard her cheap father on the other end of the phone say, "Is this why you're calling me now using a bearer card?" And Asaba Kazuma replied, "I will not leave any chance to my opponent. Once I confirm through my own channels that there is no problem, you will be able to see me soon." Genji, okay, then you should try to pay attention to safety. By the way, the Void Gene Project team has recently borrowed resources from Genji Medical to further develop the plan. As the leader, you should pay as much attention as possible. One time. I don't know why, but the number of Void Gene owners seems to have increased slightly in recent years. Hearing what Zadayoshi-gen said on the other end of the phone, Amamiyamai's struggle eased a little. He's testing. Please, we must find the problem. She reluctantly said in her heart, if Dad can't tell whether it's his child on the other end of the phone, he's really derelict in his duty. However, when Asaba Kazuma said, "Father, don't be joking. I have never had a say in Genji medical care. You are the only one I can barely rely on. Or are you going to let me get involved in Genji medical care, Father?" Amamiya was dumbfounded. She obviously never told him these things. Why does it seem like someone has seen through everything? What made her even more desperate was Genzai's next words, "It looks like it's not a disguise. Don't worry about Genji Medical. There are arrangements there now. What if I say I really want it? It's useless to want it, and it's impossible for Genji to give you this, let alone, you are not my daughter, who are you anyway?" As the recording played, Asaba Kazuma lowered his head and said in the ear of Amamiya Mai, who could not speak out, "Amamiya-san, your father has recognized that he is not me." Amamiya Mai made a whimpering sound, and then Asaba Kazuma laughed even more wildly. The empty room echoed with the sound of Amamiya Mai frantically pulling on the chains, and it took a lot of effort for Asaba Kazuma to hold her down so that she wouldn't hurt herself due to the struggle. For a long time, she heard Asaba Kazuma continue to pretend to be her and say to Minamoto Zai on the other end of the phone, "Father, stop making trouble. I'm tired of being chased. It is true that Genji Medical is not under your control, and the relevant questions you answered are basically flawless, but you overlooked one thing, Mai basically doesn't call me father. You call her too many times." Asahi Kazuma's laughter came from the cell phone recording. As expected of the head of the Genji family, I originally thought I could hide it more. After all, she is really not ready yet. Here, Asaba Kazuma cut out Minamoto Zayashi's statement. She was not in danger. Then, there came an extra sentence from Asaba Kazuma, disguised as Genzai, "My poor and useless daughter, as expected, she is not suitable to be the head of the Genji family." Amamiya Mai finally stopped struggling. Even if Asaba Kazuma didn't take off her blindfold now, she knew that Amamiya Mai's expression under the blindfold would not look very good. Asahi Kazuma restored his original voice this time and said in the recording, "Don't say that. If she is really in danger now, I won't call her for her. She is actually wary of some people, right?" Minamoto Zai said, "It makes no sense, she is still far away." Here, Asaba Kazuma cut out Minamoto Zayashi's statement, "It'll be fine as long as she's fine." It was at this moment that Amamiya Mai finally broke free of the tape on her mouth with her lips and tongue, and let out a hoarse plea. "Dad, save me." Kinya Kazuma really didn't expect that she could show such a sincere look. It seemed that he was really going to drive her crazy. But she can't see with the blindfold on. Chienyu Kazuma's eyes lit up and he directly pressed her down. Even when Amamiya Mai was cursing, her voice was as clear as the cry of a Kunlun jade phoenix. From the mobile phone held by Kinya Kazuma, he said with a smile, "Are you giving up on her like this? Don't you want to send someone to pick her up? Mr. UN, do you want me to deal with her directly?" Of course, Asahi Kazuma has cut out the word no here. "I would like to ask you to take more care of her." Asahi Kazuma has cut out the word no here. "I know she has opinions in her heart, but I don't think the family people will take action against her." Comforting dialogue. "You really don't value your daughter?" Chienyu Kazuma asked. Amamiya Mai's voice that kept shouting "Dad, save me" gradually became weaker. She heard Yuanzai's cold voice coming from the other end of the phone. "Then I will make the disobedient people behave a little better. I am the head of the UN family." These words are Minamoto Zayashi's original words, but they are not directed at Amamiya Mai, but at the person who may have taken action against Amamiya Mai. But Amamiya Mai still doesn't know. "Then I will take good care of her." Amamiya Mai finally cried uncontrollably, her voice filled with deep resentment. Why didn't you save me? So did my mother, and so did I. You were obviously irresponsible first. Why can you take it so naturally?" Asahi Kazuma's eyes lit up, she turned off the recording and took off her blindfold. He gently wiped away the tears from the corners of her eyes. He no longer dominated her brutally, but became much gentler. "Amamiya-kun, I suddenly feel sorry for you. I don't need your pity, you scumbag. But the scum can control you now, but you can't control Genji. Have you ever thought about taking revenge on them?" Amamiya Mai's dead eyes looked at him blankly. "I'll help you, but you have to give me real evidence that can threaten you." Yes, Asaba Kazuma had already guessed that there was a conflict between Amamiya Mai and Genji. Now is his time to exploit the conflict. We've traveled through Tokyo. Who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Hui Xiang. Chapter 159. Hate? That's right. Qian Yufengjian said in a low voice, let me help you, tell me everything you know, and give me all the clues you least want others to know, so that we can be a team. Asaba Kazuma lifted Amamayamai's blindfold. Amamayamai looked at him with blank eyes. After a long time, the resentment in her eyes almost turned into reality, and she whispered. How can you help me? It's impossible to touch Genji with your ability. Asayu Kazuma said with a smile, I should have reminded you that I can deduce the future. Amamayamai's good looks are a little brighter in the dark, how strong can you be in deducing the future? Asaba Kazuma took off Amamayamai's eye patch from her face and said meaningfully, but the knowledge I have learned in the future can be realized in this era in advance by deducing the future. Amamayamai sighed, isn't this worse than cheating? That's why I say that I will always be on the right path. If it doesn't work once, just do it twice. If it doesn't work twice, do it 3 times. If it doesn't work 3 times, do it 10 times. 1,000 times, in countless deductions, there is always a way to go. In other words, Amamiya-san, do you think you are smarter than me? What I can't study when deducing the future, can you surpass me by relying on overclocking mode? Amamayamai was silent for a while and said in a low voice, did you cheat in the last joint entrance examination of the 4 schools by deducing the future? Don't worry, I didn't bother to pry out the answers to the joint examination of the 4 schools just for this matter. As for the accumulation of knowledge, the knowledge I have has surpassed this era. This is what I said, do you want to the reason for working with me? Amamiya-san, you don't want your long position as head of the Genji family to be taken away by others. Okay, yes. Amamiya-mai was silent for a moment. She knew very well what Asahi Kazuma wanted. What he wanted was for him to obediently hand over her deepest hidden handle. This handle could destroy everything she had and allow her to hide it at most costs. If her life was not in danger now and she might be abandoned in the basement to die by this bastard who thinks he is a player at any time, how could she? The most important thing is that she remembered how she had called for help but received no response. Her eyes flickered, and after a moment, she sighed softly. I can tell you, and you have to tell me, how much can you help me? Qian Yufengma whispered, I can tell you now, no need to wait. I have deduced the future countless times, and there are 3 main research directions. The first one is to strengthen my design, painting, and aesthetic skills, and keep trying out which animations, comics, novels, and games can be popular in the future and earn me traffic funds. The second is to play the violin and collect excellent music that may be born in different future environments. The purpose is to cooperate with the first research direction and accelerate the birth of the IP recycling industry chain. The third is the direction of biomedical research, which is to delve deeply into the field of adjusters, which is the in-depth research on void genes that your Genji group is currently doing, including how to further discover natural adjusters, and research on how to induce ordinary people to become acquired adjusters stably without causing sacrifices. In our time, I, and Heian, were the uncrowned kings in this field. Amamayamai paused for a moment, with a little surprise in her eyes. It can be said that the first 2 research directions are more towards the cultural and creative industry. Strictly speaking, as long as you try and make more mistakes, there will always be a chance to succeed. Just like writing online articles, many authors who already have basic skills want to try to write a popular work. As long as they are fast enough, they can often directly try and make mistakes by opening new books. Then 1 or 2. Although this premise only requires that the author has sufficient hand speed. But in any case, cultural and creative products are indeed a relatively rare industry. Once they can be produced on a large scale, they can crush other people. But what she didn't know was that Kinya Kazuma had deceived people again. Asahi Kazuma didn't delve into this part of the field at all. Because he has the fruits of trial and error in his previous life in his mind. Isn't it interesting to use Japan's stories to defeat Japan in another world, and use Japan's music to play with fans in another world? He doesn't need to delve into it, he already has enough accumulation. Of course, even if Amamiya Mai knew it, she wouldn't say anything. God knows how many things this lunatic Asaba Kazuma did when he was deducing the future. Maybe in other world lines, he would have already made himself pregnant, and he was yelling at her to give birth to 5 children. But it doesn't matter, just relying on the third research direction, she has enough reasons to cooperate with Asaba Kazuma. I'll talk about my business first. Amamiya Mai sighed and finally stopped being silent. Now that the matter has come to this, there is no use in continuing to remain silent. It is better to find ways to plan a future with visible benefits. It's amazing, just think that I paid him to help me vent. Amamiya Mai comforted herself. So next, Asaba Kazuma heard a story from Amamiya Mai's mouth that was considered a secret for her. The story took place probably more than 20 years ago. At that time, her mother Tomoko Amamiya was still young, and her youthful and beautiful appearance attracted the admiration of many students. When she first entered college that year, she became a beautiful scenery in her university. However, Amamiya Tomoko is a girl with a relatively mature personality and does not interact with others casually. The atmosphere of that era was different from that of later generations. The whole of Japan was actually relatively conservative, but why did it almost evolve into high school students will be laughed at if they are C or C later on, so that many girls who did not have enough thinking ability chose YJ. I dare not think about some of the operations behind this. Asaba Kazuma has a hard time commenting on the current trend in Japan. Think about it, who is the most valuable to do this? Are they those little boys who were controlled by hormones during adolescence? Or those Neptunes who are good at sweet talking? Wrong, all wrong. This kind of culture is most beneficial to financial groups and other powerful people. Think about it, under the same appearance, the son-in-law of a consortium or the descendant of a Japanese politician uses money, power, or other means to turn you into her woman, and the Neptune uses the dog whistle effect to make you unable to live without him. Which one is easier for girls to surrender to? The answer is undoubtedly the former. Because no matter how high-end Neptune is, he has so many opportunities for trial and error, and the consortium is inherently invincible. Everything Neptune can have, the consortium can learn, and even learn better. The romantic atmosphere created by the money offensive, the gentle words spoken to you in the presidential suite of a 5-star hotel that ordinary people never see once in a lifetime, and even special people will be arranged to prepare special things for you during your period. Adding carrots and sticks, after a complete set of procedures, ordinary people will be confused immediately. Not to mention that many Japanese female students are now ashamed that they have no experience. It has only been 20 years since it has become like this. Isn't it really shameful? I'm afraid some people say too much and they believe it. Anyway, they have been ruined. If the target is a relatively reliable person, then the more powerful their status and money are, the more comfort they will naturally have. A very cruel and realistic scene. Compromise doesn't just exist in the workplace. Tomoko Amimiya was almost like this with Minamoto Zaidashi back then, but Minamoto Zaidashi was more or less Genji's son-in-law and didn't do too many bad things. He just relied on his good looks and carefully created warmth. At a certain party, he successfully took Tomoko Amamiya away. Then, Tomoko Amamiya tried to resist, but not only failed to resist in her drunken state, but also became a gangster's excitement punch. After almost adding to the fun. Fortunately, Minamoto Zaidashi is a responsible person. After comforting the crying Tomoko Amamiya, he got along with her seriously for a while. Later, Tomoko Amamiya learned about his life experience, and she still had some resistance in her heart. I didn't dare to resist anymore. From the initial forbearance, to the later relief, to the later accommodation. When she came to her senses, although she tried hard to take protective measures, the pregnancy tests still showed positive. That day, she felt very complicated, including the fear and panic of becoming a mother for the first time, and the maternal nature of becoming a mother. However, not long after she gave birth to Minamoto Zayashi suddenly disappeared. The Amamiya family was just an ordinary family. They made a little money during the period when Japan was developing at its fastest pace. However, with the signing of the Plaza Accord, Japan turned into a frenzied harvest of leaks in America. After the Amamiya family's life, the level has also plummeted. When he was forced to go bankrupt and his daughter failed to get married, Tomoko Amamiya's father was so angry that he was admitted to the hospital and passed away not long after. Later, Tomoko Amamiya wanted to ask for an explanation, so she tried every means to contact Minamoto Zayashi. She doesn't want to get back together, she just wants to know if it's just for fun. The end result is very unlovely. Genzei coldly told her that she was just a tool for him to squander his youth during his college days. Now that he was married and had someone to love, he told her to get away as far as she wanted. Tomoko Amamiya nodded to express her understanding and left directly. Later, Amamiya Tomoko raised Amamiya Mai alone until she was 8 years old. Amamiya Tomoko was admitted to the hospital directly after a high fever. After she was discharged from the hospital, her health deteriorated. Realizing that Tomoko Amamiya was not going to die soon, she was no longer willing to squeeze her old parents' pension money. She proudly turned around and left at Genji. This time, she dragged her sick body and lowered her head to beg the man. Please ask him to at least raise Amamiya Mai until she reaches adulthood. However, all this was the beginning of a tragedy. It was only later that Amamiya learned that Genji had discovered the existence of the adjuster as early as that year, and tried his best to recreate the miracle of the adjuster. After all, for Japan, where bloodline theory is paramount, what is more exciting than a bloodline talent that is passed on forever? When Tomoko Amamiya was sent to a medical institution owned by Genji for pregnancy testing, Zayashi Genji already knew that Tomoko Amamiya was an adjuster who had not yet awakened. The high fever that knocked her down was actually the appearance of awakening. It's a pity that Tomoko Amamiya didn't make it through and died in the hospital soon after. Until Tomoko Amamiya's death, Zayashi Minamoto did not take another look at Tomoko Amamiya. He just asked her to tell her that he would take Amamiya home and become a member of the Genji family. But there is a premise: she cannot be called Amamiya Mai, she must change her name to Minamoto Yumi. Amamiya Mai saw that her mother was not given the most basic respect until her death, and even her daughter's surname was not kept. When she closed her eyes, she was filled with regret. Mai, don't blame that person. There's no need. From now on, you have to live well, live hard, and live better than anyone else. This sentence became the root of the young Amamiya Mai's obsession with controlling Genji. But what are the words? Judging from Amamiya Mai's situation, she will never have the chance to control Genji in her life. It wasn't until later that something shocking happened to Genji. The head of Genji's old family planned to launch a plan to seek Genji's future. The project is called Son of God, and its purpose is to cultivate the chosen Son of God with adjusted genes and direct Genji bloodline. Implanting adjustment genes the day after tomorrow in order to obtain the power of the adjuster's innate talent, I can only say that he is worthy of being in Japanese, I really dare to bet. In the words of the old patriarch, let the real genius lead Genji into a new era. For the smooth development of the Son of God plan, Genji has actually been conducting relevant experiments for several years. Over the years, he has barely achieved results with relatively low risks. The old patriarch could no longer suppress his patience and decided to conduct experiments. But how to say it? Genzei's wife was the product of a deep union of interests. The daughter she gave birth to, Gen Zhenxian, could not be used as a test subject for the initial testing reagent. The first wave of experiments failed, and all 3 young children Genji participated in died. The same goes for the second wave of experiments. Although Genji's children did not die, they became disabled. The third wave of experiments, Maya, who had changed her name to Yumina Minamoto at this time, was a participant. She didn't necessarily need to participate in this experiment. But the old head of the Genji family asked her to participate by name. That day, Minamoto's AI took Minamoto Mayumi to meet the old family head. It was an old man with wrinkled skin. Genzen Yum asked, "If my experiment succeeds and I survive, is there any benefit?" The old man said, "You will have the opportunity to compete for the position of the head of the family." Minamoto Mayumi asked again, "Then if I succeed, can I make a small request?" The old man asked, "What request?" Minamoto Yumi said seriously, "If I survive, I will not only have the opportunity to compete for the head of the family, but also change my name. No, I will change it back to my original surname. I am Amamayamai, and I will always be Amamayamai." The old head of the family looked at her quietly, then suddenly laughed and agreed. Asahi Kazuma had already guessed what the final result would be. If he failed, then the one lying under him now should be Yumina Minamoto, not Maya Amamaya. The most ironic thing is that after the success of Amamayamai's experiment, Minamoto's AI's head wife finally couldn't sit still. The test was successful, indicating that there is a certain possibility of artificial adjusters. Especially because the genes of the same person are used, in the eyes of some people, this experiment is more replaceable. So Minamoto Shinjin became the last test subject of the Son of God plan. This half-sister went to the test bed. Fortunately, she did become an adjuster. Unfortunately, she was physically affected and confined to a wheelchair most of the time. Speaking of which, Asahi Kazuma has actually heard of this. A long time ago, when I got to know Dr. Funakoshi Hayato, the 2 people who cannot be named were Amamayamai and Genmagen. Yesterday's chapter was blocked, I'll see if I can release it. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Hui-Xiang. Chapter 160. Yes, Asahi Kazuma had actually heard about Amamayamai and her sister Minamoto Mizuru very early on. In Ishihararina's love simulation, Asahi Kazuma once had Ishihararina receive emergency treatment from Dr. Funakoshi Hayato. At that time, Dr. Hayato Funakoshi made it clear that he had dealt with 5 people who had modified genes, and Rina Ishihara was the 6th. In addition to the dead daughters of Shianayuin, Kawanishi Ryo and Funakoshi Hayato, there are 2 other people who cannot be mentioned in detail. Asahi Kazuma had speculated before. After all, Funakoshi Hayato is considered a relatively famous doctor in the industry. He is also preparing for the Genji medical examination. The adjuster who wants him to not even mention his identity is most likely an internal Genji member. However, Asahi Kazuma has never been sure who it is, but now he can be sure. They must be the only 2 girls left in the Shenzi project who have obtained the adjustment genes, Amamayamai, Minamoto Yumi, and Genmagen. The story between your parents and you shouldn't be too threatening to you. Amamaya-san, do you think this thing can threaten me? Amamayamai glanced at him indifferently. What I am going to say below is the biggest secret I have buried in my heart. If you master this, with a little planning, you have a chance to take away everything from me. Kinya Kazuma became interested and whispered, "Tell me and listen. I only discovered this in the past few years. There are actually some problems with my life experience," Amamayamai said calmly. "The last time I went for a physical examination, I received a package that had been delayed for many years." "What's inside?" Kinya Kazuma took the initiative to take up the topic. "The letter about my lack of blood relationship with Genji came from my deceased mother." Asahi Kazuma? When Amamayamai said this, visible uneasiness flashed across her face. "In order to verify this, I secretly took a test myself, and it was finally confirmed that Minamoto's AI and I are indeed not related by blood. Asahi Kazuma's expression was a little confused. No, when you Genji found the illegitimate child, didn't you go check it yourself? Amamiya Mai shook her head and said, it's useless to test, because Seiichi Minamoto and my mother did have a daughter once, well, once. Kinya Kazuma narrowed his eyes. If so, that would be really interesting. Don't think too much. My mother and I have no blood relationship either. I was her adopted child. The original child died of a high fever. Asaba Kazuma, also an adjuster. I don't know. Amamiya Mai shook her head. The DNA test was done when my sister was still alive. Minamoto Seiichi knew about it, and Genji also knew about it. I was still young when I was adopted, so I had no idea about the past. I don't have any obvious memories of what happened, and I was similar in age to my sister and looked somewhat similar to her, so I replaced her and was renamed Amamiya Mai. Kinya Kazuma smiled. What a way to exchange a raccoon cat for a prince. I'm afraid you didn't even know about this until the letter was sent to you. Amamiya Mai nodded. Back then, Japan had not generally entered the information age, so my mother used some tricks to adopt me from the orphanage without even leaving a paper registration. According to the words in her letter, after her daughter died, she was heartbroken. After discovering that I looked somewhat similar to her daughter, she had the idea of adoption, and she also wanted to try it. Take revenge on Yuen's AI. If Minamoto's AI had chosen to break up peacefully at the beginning, Amamiya Tomoko's life would not have become a mess. She really didn't know that Minamoto's AI was already married at the time. But she still understands Yuen's AI relatively well, so she wants to take a gamble. Even if Yuen's AI doesn't care about your mother, he will still care about his daughter with his blood, right? Asaba Kazuma sighed, and then said, if Minamoto's AI chooses to take you away from her, then he will raise a daughter who has no blood relationship with him at all. If he doesn't choose to take it away, then you will replace your mother's daughter and become the sustenance of her heart. No matter which way, she will be mentally prepared from the beginning. This is the only way ordinary people can take revenge on the heirs of a consortium like Minamoto Seiichi. Amamiya Mai's expression was a little painful, but she gradually regained her composure after a while, nodded and said, that's true, but then the plan changed. Because your mother is seriously ill. Well, she was leaving, and she couldn't hold on until that day. But she still couldn't trust me, so she didn't wait until Yuen's AI took the initiative to come to the door, so she went to Genji for help. Jian Yufengjian was silent for a moment and whispered, don't you hate me? What do you hate? To put it bluntly, your mother may just use you as a tool for revenge, as the final knife to strike at your father, Minamoto's AI. Amamiya Mai shook her head. My relatively happy childhood was not a lie, and what she did to raise me was not a lie, not to mention that she, who had died of illness long ago, could not have guessed the experiences I had later. So when she asked Yuen's AI for help, she really wanted to give me a chance to live a stable life. She even left a letter that was mailed many years later, just to tell me some truth when I became an adult. In this case, why should I make myself uncomfortable? I will continue to move towards the goal she expects. I am just Amamiya Mai, nothing more. She paused for a moment, looked at him coldly and said, are you satisfied with this answer now? With this answer, you can threaten me at any time. I have kept the test report in my hidden network disk account. You can log in to check it out. Asaba Kazuma smiled, untied her shackles, and said softly, then, Amamiya-san, you can tell me the password now and let me verify it. Amamiya Mai didn't know that she would suddenly kidnap her. Unless this guy had foresight, it would be impossible to prepare such fatal evidence in advance. As long as Amamiya Mai does preserve relevant evidence, it will prove that what she said is most likely true. But Tomoko Amamiya also accidentally played a big trick. Amamiya Mai used to really think that she was her biological daughter, so she tried every means to obtain the rights and interests that she could obtain while keeping Amamiya's name. For this reason, he even agreed to the need to serve as a test subject in the Son of God project, and finally survived successfully. He also understood why she was so emotional when he threatened her with a disguised phone call. Children's brains are not fully developed during their early years, and many things cannot be remembered clearly. So Amamiya Tomoko played a trick of stealing the sky, and after one set of operations, her daughter was changed without anyone noticing, and even Amamiya Mai herself didn't know about it. Now everything is revealed. The reason she risked everything to participate in the experiment is fake, the blood flowing in her body is fake, the relationship between her and her parents is fake, and even the reason she created for herself to fight is fake. Tomoko Amamiya just hopes that she can survive to adulthood with the support of Genji. It would be better if she could stab Genzayashi in the back. But Amamiya Mai didn't know about this at first, and by the time she got the letter, it was already too late. Because, she has now participated in the competition for the next successor of the Genji group. She cannot be found to have a problem, and to the extent that, in order to consider the possible dangers, it is even necessary for her to become the real manager of the Genji group. Only when she sat on the highest position, completely became the master of Genji, and gradually eroded the foundation of Genji, would she have the opportunity to fully have the power to protect herself before Genji discovered the problem. After all, what is fake is fake. It is impossible for Genji to accept this shame and humiliation. Afterwards, Mai Amamiya is in danger. She had been put on the stove and could not get down. Asaba Kazuma went in to verify the situation according to the account information she gave, and finally nodded. Amamiya Mai was very sincere. This is indeed evidence that can directly deter her. Asahi Kazuma swung her phone and sent the message directly. After a moment, he looked at Amamiya Mai and said, "I have given the information to a reliable enough person. If there is a problem with our cooperation, the information will be sent directly to the person it should know. Of course, I sincerely hope that we can have a happy cooperation." Amamiya Mai exuded low pressure, "Then can you get out of me first?" Asaba Kazuma stood up slowly, and then suddenly said with a smile, "No, I quite like Amamiya-san." After a long time, Amamiya Mai put on her shirt coldly and said in a low voice, "Now, let's start the negotiation between us." You have successfully controlled Amamiya Mai. I have to say, Miss Genji tastes really good. You finally understand why some people are immersed in it sometimes. In fact, it is just physical satisfaction, not that the point is spiritual satisfaction, which makes you feel the joy of depravity. System prompt, you have unlocked the achievement of the road to fall, and your achievement points add 1. System prompt, you have unlocked the achievement Overlord's Hardbow, achievement point add 1, and the hidden achievement requirement is 1/3 completed. You have reached a cooperation with Amamiya Mai according to the previous agreement between you and her. You will start in-depth cooperation with Amamiya Mai on the technical data of the Gemini Black technology you developed. Before that, in order to save your negative senses on Amamiya Mai's side, you decided to let her taste your, a little sweetness, you choose. Full firepower, let her try what it means to be on the top of Mount Everest. Tell you the truth about deceiving her and make her more afraid of your methods. Conceal the truth and keep deceiving until she has no value to you except her body. Free simulation. In the simulation space, Asaba Kazuma was stunned when he saw the system prompt 1/3 of the hidden achievement requirements have been completed. What kind of strange hint is this? Is there any hidden achievements in this game? He looked at the Overlord's achievement. Judging from the fact that this weird achievement can complete the conditions for the hidden achievement, I am afraid that the conditions for the remaining 2 hidden achievements may be very unfair. Not all of them are special achievements that can only appear in the fallen line. Considering the circumstances surrounding this achievement, it's actually possible. Let's see if there is a way to trigger the remaining two fulfillment conditions. His eyes looked at the three options. Option, TISC, the bottomless operation method unique to the fallen line, has the advantage of being fun, but that's about it. The option is obviously to tell Amamyamai how he deceived her before. Choosing this option can be called a thunderstorm, which means that Amamyamai's secret is in vain. Oh no, really speaking, Amamyamai has been hummed by him many times in the past few days. If you can find more excuses and reasons, this option is not without value. As for option, if you don't consider the possible spiritual condemnation and directly use Amamyamai to death, maybe you can get the most benefits. After all, as long as people are shameless enough, maybe this tentative simulation can actually get something interesting. But Asahi Kazuma sighed. Choose. Although that someone once said that the passage to the depths of a woman's heart is. But from another perspective, the same applies to men. After all, Asaba Kazuma is not the kind of person who has no emotions at all. Anyway, he feels so good that he doesn't mind leaving some kind thoughts for Amamyamai. Even if the kindness is minimal. When Asaba Kazuma was preparing to embark on a new direction, he was in a room in Genji, Tokyo. Amamyamai suddenly woke up from her slumber. She looked at the ceiling in confusion. She didn't know why, but she felt as if she had had another nightmare, but just like before, she could not remember the scene in the nightmare. She could only vaguely feel the disgusting but constantly echoing aftertaste of the nightmare. She could notice that whenever she tried to recall the contents of her dream, she would feel a faint sense of nausea. This is enough to show that the content of the nightmare is something I will never like. But when Amamyamai opened the quilt and sniffed lightly, she seemed to be able to vaguely smell a faint smell of toilet water. The most important thing is that she just finished washing a pair of underwear. She didn't allow anyone to rest this night. Why did she wash it all over the floor again when she woke up? Amamyamai's face was dark. Because she does not really have the blood of Genji, but now she is actively involved in the disputes between Genji, she is becoming more and more sensitive to feedback from the outside world. She is afraid that someone will accidentally discover her problem, and then she will be punished on the spot. Sent. No one knows better than her that the Genji, as an ancient clan in Japan, do many things without any sense of morality. Especially now that he has really become a shame to Genji to some extent. In anger, God knows what decision Genji will make after learning the truth. If my abnormal behavior leads to more problems. However, something feels wrong. Amamyamai narrowed her eyes. Doesn't she know about her own body? Now this situation is simply an anomaly among anomalies. She began to wonder if she was being targeted by some special void gene owners. After all, after awakening, the owners of those special genes might really have special abilities that were close to superpowers. For example, her genetic talent, and another example. Minamoto's ability. No, this matter must be handled well. No matter who is plotting behind the scenes, people cannot find out that I have such an embarrassing problem, otherwise, it will be very troublesome if it gets spread. Amamyamai thought for a moment and made an operation that Asaba Kazuma would be surprised by. She took off the pure cotton clothes under her body, took out a new piece of clothing, tore it into a sanitary napkin, pasted it directly on the private cotton clothes, hid the wet clothes, and put on new clothes. Although it feels a little uncomfortable, let's just make do with it. Before she figured out the problem, Amamyamai might have been wearing night sanitary napkins in fear for a long time. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Hui. Chapter 161. Choose. You decided to tell her the truth about your deception. You released the complete conversation between you and Minamoto's AI in front of her. Amamiyamai was speechless, knowing that she had been deceived by you. In the end, she sighed and still chose to accept the covenant between you and her. Her most critical secret has been exposed to you, and now she has no trump card that can truly threaten you. Seeing that she chose to give in, you had a look of satisfaction on your face. Seeing that she still had scars from the struggle on her body and looked weak, you became excited again and launched a move on her without hesitation. Invite. Amamiyamai is hesitating. Amamiyamai reluctantly agreed to your request. Now she has given up on herself. She can only comfort herself that this is a continuation of cooperation, but she hopes you can be gentle this time. She is already very tired. You agreed to Amamiyamai's request, and this time you held her in your arms like an easily broken rag doll. There is a difference between blindfolding and taking off the blindfold, and there is a difference between ruthless venting and affection. You consider that you will have to go through these things with Ishihararina and Shianakane in the future, and hope to use the experience you learned from Amamiyamai, re-engrave it on them and give them a good enough memory. You chose to be gentle to Amamiyamai. Amamiyamai was surprised to find that the situation was completely different from before. You have fully learned the experience during this period. Using her again, you are indeed like a duck in water, knowing the twists and turns. This is a tug of war between the two sides. Although it is not uncomfortable, it is still a bit difficult for my Amamiya, especially after you act lightly, and the pain in the previous process slowly turns into another indescribable feeling. Her eyes were a little hollow, sometimes she frowned and said nothing, sometimes her lips were slightly opened, and the pain on her face gradually eased away. Seeing that she was confused, you didn't say anything, just maintained this weird posture and took her out of the basement and to the second floor of the room. Before Tatsuo Fujiki went to prison, he paid special attention to the privacy of his home. All the glass windows were one-way mirrors, so outsiders could not see in. You put Amamiyamai against the glass that was a little hot from the sun. She held onto the windowsill weakly, looking at the world outside the window in a daze, and suddenly she felt that her mood had improved a lot. The scene unfolds. A large number of bright pictures filled Asahikazuma's mind, and Asahikazuma had a satisfied smile on his face. In fact, even men who have experienced love affairs rarely know that no matter how poor the cooperation between you and the woman is, it is not the same concept as violent resistance, nor is it the same concept as lying flat like a zombie. If there is a girl who is completely asleep and completely unconscious, then the experience can help you understand what it means to match men and women, and work without getting tired. Previously, Amamiyamai had been waking up and sleeping, sleeping and waking up again. With such strong hatred, there was almost no cooperation between her and Asabakazuma. On the contrary, now that the two have reached a cooperative relationship, the disgust in their hearts is barely suppressed, and the mentality of binding each other with calculations and interests has come to mind. Although the relationship between the two is still so bad, after all, a basis for cooperation was reached. This time, Amamiyamai's experience was completely different. For a while, Amamiyamai actually felt that it was good to do it once in a while. Anyway, just treat the scumbag Asabakazuma as an electric toy. Kinyu Fengjian didn't say much. It wasn't until the clouds cleared and the rain cleared that he said in a deep voice. Your father's Aoshi Minamoto is a bit strange. Amamiyamai slowly wiped her body with a wet tissue, then glanced at Asabakazuma and said, "What's weird? I just listened to the true and complete version of the recording for you, so you should know that your Genji family head actually cares about you." The corners of Amamiyamai's lips raised slightly, showing a sarcastic smile. How could he not care about me, Asabakazuma? You may not understand a problem. For my father, one of me and Genma must become the next successor of Genji. No one who has become the head of the Genji family will choose to give up the power of the main family. They will only try every means to hold the power of the main family tightly in their hands. The only two king bombs that UNZI had at this time were me and my cheap sister. Although the real situation was not as cruel as Amamyamai had imagined before, perhaps because the anger accumulated in her heart had been ignited by Asaba Kazuma, Amamyamai was unable to face up to Minamoto Zei in a short period of time. Kinya Kazuma held her in his arms and squeezed her hard. Amamyamai pushed him away slightly and said, "Go away, your value as a toy has ended." Qian Yufengjian smiled, grabbed her legs nonchalantly, and lifted her whole body up. "Don't mention it, I just thought you were quite light." "Disgusting man, how many times have you tried, and you still don't know how to be satisfied?" "He is really insatiable," Amamyamai mocked, while secretly looking at Asaba Kazuma. Seeing that Asaba Kazuma made no new moves, she finally breathed a sigh of relief. At least for now, it seems that Asaba Kazuma does have the idea of cooperating with her. However, he is really strong. Amamyamai felt that if she had not turned on the overclocking mode, her body would not be able to threaten him at all. Now that she was covered in mud, she really had no ability to fight back. Now that he suddenly picked her up, she suddenly became wary. "You haven't had enough fun yet." Asaba Kazuma laughed and said, "Actually, I'm getting a little tired of it. I thought this kind of thing was quite interesting, but after trying it a few more times, I realized that sometimes it's even worse than using my hands." Asaba Kazuma put her down, but Amamyamai's face darkened. Although she knew clearly that Kinha Kazuma was deliberately irritating her and testing her compliance, she still felt quite unhappy after hearing this. "I always feel underestimated." "Are you kidding me? Kyoya Chunfeng, a great beauty like me, actually says he is inferior to his own hands. This is such a huge shame." Amamyamai was so angry that she even started to grind her teeth. "You didn't spend so long in the basement before you had the guts. There's nothing you can do about it?" "Who told you to be so tough talking at that time?" Kinya Kazuma wiped her lips with his hand and said with a low smile, "You're tough talking in every sense of the word. Men can't stand it. Scumbag." "Well said, I just like to see you gnashing your teeth and wanting to take revenge on me, but in the end you rolled into the same bed with me." Amamyamai didn't know how many times she was stunned by Asaba Kazuma's shamelessness. But in the end, he still sighed helplessly, "You are so arrogant. Until now, you still treat me as a game character? Asaba Kazuma, you will regret this attitude sooner or later." Kinya Kazuma just smiled and said nothing. "What do you regret? Do you think you are Rina and Yuan? Still want me to regret it? This time the simulation is about simply having fun and seeing what will happen if a Shura field breaks out between the two women." As for Amamyamai, although he is indeed somewhat reluctant to leave because he tasted the unrivaled delicious food, this is a game after all. Asaba Kazuma will try his best to treat Amamyamai as a rag. After using it up, it will be thrown directly into the trash can, and then the two of them will never interact with each other. Asaba Kazuma comforted himself like this, as if he wanted to stop his conscience from being so condemned. However, when he had such an idea in his mind, he suddenly felt unhappy again. "Why did you change your expression again?" Amamyamai mocked. No way, you idiot, didn't you just have some dirty thoughts, only to find yourself turned into a thin dog?" My Amamya is a bit like Shiana Kane in terms of her tough mouth. No matter how soft her body is now, her mouth is as stubborn as hell. Asaba Kazuma touched his chin and said meaningfully, "Actually, I was thinking just now, should we use each other? When the value of our use is gone, we will go our separate ways. Anyway, I won't have anything to do with you in the future." On the relationship. The corners of Amamyamai's mouth twitched slightly. How long had it been before the two of them reached an agreement? This guy has already started thinking about how to throw her aside. But she quickly managed her expression and said bluntly, "So, what's the reason why you don't want to think about it now?" Amamyamai has begun to understand Asaba Kazuma's character to some extent. If this person wants to make a plan, he will not express his thoughts directly. He will only hide them quietly and wait for you to give him a fatal blow when you relax. Hit. In other words, when Asaba Kazuma said he wants to go his separate ways with her, that actually meant that he no longer planned to do so. I find that we are quite compatible, in every sense of the word. The most important thing is that I suddenly feel that it would be such a waste to throw you away directly. Oh, why, we are just playing for fun, and now you want to have a good relationship, Amamaya sneered. She didn't believe this liar's words at all. Did you understand something wrong? Asahi Kazuma grinned with a strange smile. I just feel that sometimes my two girlfriends and I have been holding it in for a long time, and we have to find a stable partner. Let's use the gun mount to unleash the firepower. Amamaya spat. This guy's words are really getting more and more vulgar. She was really treating her reality as a game. Game. Amamaya glanced at Asaba Kazuma thoughtfully. If this scumbag hadn't lied before, then at least before the last day of the cultural festival, the time he spent with her was not his time to deduce the future. Using this point in time as the dividing line, looking back, that is to say, the time when we really start to deduce the future is actually after the cultural festival. Amamaya was thoughtful. At least on the last day of the cultural festival, when he was lying on the playground taking a nap and the two of them had a preliminary conversation, Asaba Kazuma, the scumbag, had not yet begun to deduce the future. Based on this premise, that is to say, the person I was talking to at that time was his normal posture. Amamaya is relatively confident in her own eyesight. Almost all her knowledge of Asaba Kazuma came from her previous meetings with him. But later she discovered that she had no control over this scumbag's personality, which made her doubt her life. It seemed that the results of so many years of experience in Genji-related companies could not be used on this man. This feeling of having nowhere to start was also the reason why she reluctantly compromised. This man was the most powerful rival she had ever encountered among her peers. But now she suddenly had a doubt in her heart. If her vision was not wrong, Asahi Kazuma in normal times is indeed, as she speculated, relatively easy to be soft-hearted. For the young students whom she values especially, then his so-called deduction of the future, this thing is a bit interesting. Premise 1, Asaba Kazuma's future deduction must definitely involve his own thinking and control it in real time. Judgment basis, for many of his actions, he did not predict the future so much as he did it after he had an idea. Conclusion, during the conversation with her, Asaba Kazuma has been directly interfering with his future choices in some way. Amamaya confirmed this matter first. Premise 2, my personality profile of Amamaya is not wrong. In reality, Asaba Kazuma is such a person. Judgment basis, if Asaba Kazuma was already in the state of deducing the future during the cultural festival, there is no reason why I would have almost knocked him out of the Shura field. Conclusion, because of my operation, he was furious, so he started to use future deduction to seek changes. Thinking of this, Amamaya suddenly felt her scalp numb. Because if this corollary is correct, it means there is a third rule. Premise 3, Asaba Kazuma really likes Shion, a classmate, and that pitiful-looking girl from the bottom of his heart. Judgment basis, bringing the real-life character model of Asaba Kazuma into the future, Asaba Kazuma, who is kind and good-looking, and can continuously improve her abilities, will definitely be the center of attention, and beautiful girls will also be attracted by it. Such people are attracted. Conclusion, when Asaba Kazuma brought his own emotions to deduce the future, beautiful people attracted each other, and finally had a beautiful past originating from the future. However, Asaba Kazuma's original character may be immersed in, unable to break away from the memory of the future. Thinking of this, Amamaya finally felt her scalp numb and her body began to tremble. Because of the first three premises, the fourth premise will be triggered with a high probability. Premise 4, Asahi Kazuma really falls in love with the two of them and is willing to work harder for them to seek a better future. Judgment basis, at least Asaba Kazuma smiled sincerely when facing Shiina-san and that girl, and he even did not hesitate to attack me in the future deduction for this reason. Conclusion, Asaba Kazuma no longer wants to find a third person, he just wants to live a stable life with those two people, and the reason why he attacked me is to introduce me to stimulate the emotions of his two love partners, so as to find someone who can make him happy. A way for two women to coexist harmoniously. Premises 1, 2, 3, and 4 come together, and a brand new truth appears on the paper. This guy may not be joking. For him, the future is a game, and he is just a dispensable character in the game. When he doesn't want a third party to intervene, he treats me best. The way to deal with it is not to invest emotionally. In fact, maybe it was because I almost ruined his affairs at that time that he came to me specifically to advance his plan without emotion, because, if it were me, he would not feel so guilty. Amamaya suddenly raised her head and looked at Asaba Kazuma, the sound of grinding her teeth was clearly audible. Scumbag, you guy, you really treat me as an NPC and pass the plot, right? Street Diary. Harmony Diary. Don't be surprised that the first few pictures have a small number of words, I guess they've been stared at recently. If you think there is something wrong with the paragraph, it is most likely that part of the content has been deleted. The above. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Huasiang. Chapter 162. Scumbag, you guy, you really treat me as an NPC and pass the plot, right? Qian Yufengjian was stunned when he heard this. Suddenly he smiled and said, although I have no hidden thoughts, you guessed it so quickly, which really surprises me. Amamaya said harshly, you are as cold and heartless as an electric toy. Qian Yufengjian raised her chin and said provocatively, don't say this nonsense. Shouldn't you know best whether I have a temperature or not? After a while, he added, and if I'm like this, shouldn't you feel more at ease? At least there is no emotion between you and me except for interests and gun mounts, which makes our cooperation more pure. In other words, Amamiya-san, don't you want to sit on the throne of the Genji family and let the supermen of the Genji family watch the foundation that their family has built over the years be quietly transferred to the hands of outsiders? This kind of statement full of the flavor of childhood suddenly made Amamiya's heart move at this moment. What about you? Don't tell me you would be so kind to help me. Asaba Kazuma said with a smile, the main reason is that I suddenly thought of a very interesting question. I think it will not be a big problem for me to establish a consortium belonging to Asaba Kazuma in the future. But in the early stage, I need someone who can protect me from the wind and rain. After mastering your fatal weakness, you are the best choice. Of course, maybe there is a little selfishness on my part. It's both your first time and mine. I'm very controlling. Although it's just a one-night stand, I plan to lock you with me for the rest of my life. I think you'll be willing to maintain this relationship with me for as long as a relationship of desire, or, I pressured you to agree. Savage, vulgar, and totally self-absorbed. But inexplicably, Amamaya actually felt that this person, at least had some feelings for people who had some relationship with him. So, you want to support me, a person without the blood of Genji, to become the head of the Genji family, and then fully experience what it's like to be the daughter of a consortium or even a person in power, right? How wonderful! Everyone who writes novels knows that the easiest way to create a lovable heroine is to make her unattainable in the past, but then she actively commits herself to him. If she has the opportunity to experience it once in the future, it will not matter. It's useless for me to take the initiative. Amamaya showed a cruel smile, then you have to be careful, don't get bitten by me when the time comes, then you will become a joke. Asaba Kazuma smiled faintly, no, I said that I will always be on the right path, and it is unreasonable to deduce the future. Amamaya sneered, okay, I know your ability is very powerful, but I'm curious about a question. Are you really so confident? No one can crack your deduction in the future. Kinyo Kazuma shook his head. Even if it is cracked, it will be useless. Because Amamiyamai didn't know at all that her true reliance was no longer the deduced future brought about by the love simulation. Knowing something about the future gave him the confidence to accelerate. But the talent given to him by the adjustment genes he already possesses is destined to keep his lower limit being raised until no one can stop him. This is inevitable and will not be changed by Asuka Kazuma's will. As long as the love simulation continues, he will continue to get stronger, and eventually he may even become the existence that Tatsuo Fujiki most desires to be in his life, a near god living in the human world. Seeing him like this, Amamiyamai couldn't figure out what Asaba Kazuma was hiding. But she still said stiffly, "Have you ever thought about a question? If one day, in the future you deduced, those people related to you all have memories of the future, do you think you still have a good idea of the future situation? How certain can we be?" Kinyo Kazuma's brows jumped. What Amamiyamai said was a very serious question. Could he happen to have some kind of mind-reading superpower that could read future memories from his mind? But after a moment he smiled again. "Impossible, absolutely impossible, the advantage lies with me." After finishing speaking, he suddenly felt that his flag was a bit serious, and then added, "It's different. My lower limit will become more and more terrifying, and eventually it will directly surpass other people's upper limit. By that time, everyone will you can't stop me, and neither can you Genji." Amamiyamai smiled, "You are scared, but I don't necessarily need to stop you. If I can really remember the things in the dream in reality, I will arrange for someone to kill you first, so I don't have to worry about my secrets being leaked." Asuka Kazuma glanced at her dissatisfied. "It seems that I have to find a way to make your mouth as soft as the other mouth, instead of saying hard words there every day." Amamiyamai said, "If you are scared, just beg me. I will cut off your bad thing directly when the time comes, so that if you die, you can leave traces elsewhere." Chienyu Kazuma shivered subconsciously. Somehow, he actually felt that the black spider Amamiyamai could really do this. He scratched his head and said after a moment, "Let's not talk about this for now. Let me remind you first. I think you need to understand clearly who is our friend and who is our enemy." Amamiyamai frowned. "Are you referring to the inside of Genji?" Asaba Kazuma nodded. "To be honest, I suggest you investigate the relationship between your father and your mother." Huh? Amamiyamai was a little confused. "I don't know if you have ever thought about a question. Regarding the Son of God project that changed everything for you back then, there are many hidden problems in it." "What's the problem?" Amamiyamai frowned, having no idea for a moment. Asuka Kazuma couldn't call her stupid. The CRISPR-Cas9 technology that set off a global gene editing frenzy once caused a fierce competition between America and West End over this technology. The national emblem of America even created a new legal provision specifically for this matter in order to allow Zhang Feng, a Chinese scientist who was studying this technology at the time, to quickly obtain a patent and take the lead in advance. The reason why this happened is that although Zhang Feng was the first to study CRISPR-Cas9 technology, he was the first to use CRISPR-Cas9 for gene editing in animal cells. Professor Newell Charpentier and Professor Jennifer Doudna step in step, and the reason is, the two female scientists ignored the gap between eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells. This knowledge can be found in high school biology textbooks, but the two female scientists who were obsessed with the authorities missed the possibility of fully mastering the patent of this technology. Even though the Nobel Prize later awarded the honor of CRISPR-Cas9 to two scientists were hired, but the most critical patented technology was in the hands of America's Zhang Feng and the Jewish consortium behind it. Are Professors Emmanuel and Jennifer fools? No, it's not. They are countless masters in this field. But even if you are a great master, it does not mean that you can get rid of the barriers of knowledge and vision. Just like Amamayamai, even if Asaba Kazuma had reminded her, she couldn't immediately think of the key to the God-Son plan. So he sighed and said, "Let me tell you a question first, Amamaya-san. If you haven't forgotten all your superficial high school biology knowledge, then you should know that compared to a baby that has been born or even an adult, humans and fertilized eggs will be more difficult to perform gene editing and gene induction. In other words, if Genji Medical and the people you invested in have no problem with their minds, they should directly start with the fertilized eggs, and then use some methods that you Genji can turn into legal depregnancy, to mass produce the fertilized eggs. Adjuster of your Genji bloodline. Wouldn't it be obviously less difficult this way?" Amamayamai's mouth opened slightly, and she was about to retort, but suddenly she realized a question in her mind. What Asaba Kazuma said is right. Even for babies who have already been born, the operation is very difficult. If Genji wasn't completely crazy, there would be no way that this almost completely out of control technology would be used on Amamayamai's generation. Look, now you realize something is wrong, don't you? Asaba Kazuma spread his hands. I forgot to tell you, among the many special talents I possess, one of them is absolute pitch. This talent has been developed by me to the extent that I can easily discern the emotions in other people's timbres. Your cheap father couldn't hide the anger and worry in his voice. Although he hid it very well, it couldn't be hidden from my ears. So it is not unfair to say that you will be defeated. This is a double victory of physical strength and skill. Amamayamai glanced at him fiercely and stepped on his toes. She didn't use much force, but it was obvious that she believed Asaba Kazuma's words. What do you mean by saying this to me? Asaba Kazuma spread his hands and said, it's not interesting, I just want to tell you that in the field of gene editing, Japan is not as strong as you think, and it is far behind America. Even if your Genji group has planned in advance and launched related projects in this area, according to common sense, it will take a long time. During this waiting period, in areas you don't know yet, this kind of experiment may have been carried out on Yuanzai's generation for a long time. Your father suddenly chose to leave. Gee, the incompetence active escape? Or are you preparing to lurk and wait for the opportunity to win with one strike? This may not be a suitable choice when it is impossible to deduce the future. Amamayamai pursed her lips and didn't say much. Your father, who lives in the Genji family, is naturally considered wealthy to ordinary people, but that doesn't mean he has the right to refuse. You have been in this family for so many years, so you should know that for this kind of family, the interests of the family are far above personal emotions. When he left your mother, oh, I'm afraid there are many doubts behind it. The most difficult thing for Amamayamai to overcome is her relationship with Minamoto Zaiyoshi. Although Amamaya Tomoko is not her biological mother, she is also the person who gave her a second life. Seeing Tomoko Amamaya die of illness, Minamoto Zaiyoshi did not come to see her, and she became a person who seemed to have relatives, but actually had no relatives, wandering in this world like a lonely ghost. She took a deep breath. I understand what you mean. I will assume that my father is an ally who has the opportunity to help me. Actually, it's not impossible for your sister Minamoto Shinzuru to become your ally if I guessed correctly. She was unable to withstand the backlash of body activation after her gene awakened, so she could only sit in a wheelchair. Superior. This is a point that can be exploited. If she wants to stand up, she can actually do it. I have the corresponding technology here. As for how this technology can be converted into your interests, it depends on how you negotiate with her. Amamayamai suddenly raised her head. Has the technology you mastered reached this level? Amamayamai thought that the technology mastered by Asaba Kazuma was at best like the early scientists who had just discovered CRISPR-Cas9 technology. Although it had the possibility to change the world, it still took a long time. But now I find that this doesn't seem to be the case. Asaba Kazuma didn't hide much. He couldn't talk to Amamayamai about the specific technical details. One was because the technology was confidential, and the other was because Amamiyamai didn't quite understand the more in-depth technology even after he talked about it. So he only talked about things that Asaba Kazuma could do with the technology he had mastered, so that he could give Amamiyamai an intuitive feeling. Amamiyamai also didn't expect that Asaba Kazuma had developed to this extent in private. This kind of technological power is indeed, as he said, completely capable of subverting everything in the existing field of gene editing. It can even be said that if Asaba Kazuma uses all this technology, I am afraid that it will be impossible to simply cooperate with Japan. Cooperation with an international perspective is the right way. There are many established capital and local famous families in Japan that really can't afford it. They just rely on eating the afterglow of this declining country to survive. Amamiyamai suddenly felt a sense of expectation in her heart. Asaba Kazuma was right, if he was willing to stand on her side, he might really have a chance to do it. Become the true master of Genji. Amamiyamai is an ambitious person. It would be a lie to say that she had no idea at all about the position of the Lord of Genji. Kinya Kazuma's words finally made her lower her head and find a suitable reason for herself. At least cooperating with him will help me get what I want. At the worst, I'll use him as an electric device. Anyway, when I become the head of the Genji family in the future, I will also need to find a wild man from outside to help me. Managing Genji. I don't want to find a man, at least this guy is not that ugly, and I will eat him when he is bitten. Wait a minute, with this man's temper, how could he possibly get married? No matter, let's seize the future first. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Hui-Xiang. Chapter 163. Use your willpower to say, shui, 4 sounds, to convince Amamiyamai, and bring an experience that has never been experienced before to this cautious girl. After you and Amamiyamai formed an offensive and defensive alliance, and when you were about to leave the house that had brought a shameful past to Amamiyamai, you once again invited her to a showdown. Amamiyamai thought about it for a moment, and half-decided agreed. It was another hearty duel. Amamiyamai mocked you for being just like a cricket and a thin dog, and then she left the room holding onto the wall with her legs shaking. You didn't see each other again for the next week. When you met again, it was actually in the classroom of Hakuin High School's special class, and Amamiyamai came to school for the rare occasion. The classroom was in chaos that day, not because of Amamiyamai, but because of you. No one thought that Amamiyamai, the recognized eldest lady of the consortium, would show such a close relationship with you after she appeared again. To be more precise, in the eyes of others, it was Amamiyamai who took the initiative to deal with you, but you ignored her. In simulation space. Asahi Kazuma has a black question mark face. Good guy, this eldest lady hasn't had enough fun in the past few days. Are you really not afraid to just pick her up and execute her on the spot? This guy has this bug. According to the agreement between Asaba Kazuma and her, Amamiyamai provided him with the necessary financial support and acted as a protective umbrella on the surface. As a partner, she strengthened the closeness of the relationship between the two and guided Ishii Harurina and Shiina Yuan. Hostility towards her. As compensation, Asaba Kazuma will jointly establish a small technology research institute with the company she controls. The specific operation is similar to the operation performed by Asaba Kazuma and Shiina Yuan in their previous cooperation with the Homogen clan. It's just that at that time, he and Kane were directly cooperating with Genji in depth, and this time, Mai Amamiya, one of the main leaders of the Genji group, was designated as the partner. The former is equivalent to directly cooperating with all companies under Genji, but the latter is limited to cooperating with Amamiyamai. This was the easiest way he could think of to support Amamiyamai. After all, when your ability in scientific research reaches a certain level, you no longer beg the company, but the company begs you. As long as Asaba Kazuma can guarantee his scientific research level, The fact that Amamiyamai has had in-depth cooperation with him is the biggest capital in itself. But now it seems that Amamiyamai is trying to cause trouble. Your classmates can't understand why you, who had barely spoken to Amamiyamai before, could easily get closer to this young lady as planned. Amamiyamai tried to stir up the topic more than once in the classroom and chat with you for a while, but you avoided the topic every time, as if you didn't want to get involved too much with him. If you make up your mind, the most you can do is maintain a friendship with this dangerous woman, but it is impossible to really go further with this guy. Amamiyamai clearly knows that your heart is already filled to the brim with 2 girls, and she really can't tolerate more people coming in, so she deliberately causes trouble in front of you. This makes you a little unhappy. It just so happened that Mr. Hayakawa had something to do with you at this time, and Maya Amamiya also had something to go to the academic affairs office, so when class was over, she followed you to the office. The scene unfolds. Asaba Kazuma looked at Amamiyamai with a worried look on his face and said, "Is there something wrong with you? We agreed to cooperate with each other, but this is how you cooperate with each other." Amamiyamai glanced at him, raised her eyebrows and said, "Don't you want to try and see the reaction of your 2 little girlfriends? You don't really think that trying it as a work partner will work, do you?" Asahi Kazuma. Seeing Asaba Kazuma fall into silence, Amamiyamai sneered and said, "Women, no matter how docile they are, will have a strong sense of crisis after discovering that their territory has been invaded, but this does not mean that they will definitely take action. Just like you men, you like to accumulate and calculate the little problems in love little by little, and then explode them when you can't bear it anymore. Now you and your 2 little girlfriends haven't completely accomplished anything, so the crisis brought by your work partner's sense, but there is no way to achieve the purpose of letting you test." Asaba Kazuma took a deep breath and said, "So what are you going to do? Let them truly feel that their territory is invaded by a powerful enemy, make them frightened and angry, and let them choose to defend the enemy together. Isn't this the result you want most? So can you put your feet down before you say this?" Kinya Kazuma glanced at the long leg that hit his knee, and slapped it down. He was already a little tired of the crazy output some time ago. "Quite smart," Amamiyamai muttered, and then said with a smile, "Your Shiina-senpai is watching you from behind." The corner of Kinya Kazuma's mouth twitched, and he knew that this woman had no good intentions. She seems to be too obsessed with the scumbag, maybe because of the trauma left by what happened to Amamiya Tomoko. But Kinya Kazuma didn't give her face. When Rina and Yuine are away, you can use her as a gun mount. Anyway, she is quite light to hold and can continue to output for a long time. But if she wants to interfere with Rina and Yuine's affairs... Kinya Kazuma narrowed his eyes. Amamiyamai only felt a dangerous aura permeating her body. Asaba Kazuma glanced at her belly vaguely. Amamiyamai was also stubborn. She straightened her neck and raised her head and said, "Why, haven't you seen pretty girls?" Kinya Kazuma said with a smile, "I don't know if I have seen it, but..." He silently made a pop mouth shape, and Amamiyamai didn't want to speak anymore. This man is really brave. He clearly reminded him that Shianakian was walking over, but he was still doing this kind of operation with his back to his girlfriend. But what Amamiyamai didn't know was that Asaba Kazuma was actually sweating all the time on her back. It would be a pure lie to say that he has no other thoughts at the moment. He knew that Amamiya was not a good person. He could lift such a high-status young lady up high and suddenly put it down, and watch her sing to the sky and play a melodious movement. It was an irresistible sense of accomplishment. Actually quite addictive. If he hadn't set rules for himself in advance and had already made up his mind to ignore the heroine in the simulation, he would have to be immersed in it soon. Including directly rejecting her just now, he is also constantly hinting through his words and deeds that he only maintains the most primitive beast relationship with her. Other than that, the relationship between him and her is at best that of a hunter. Unexpectedly, by some mistake, he got through a disaster. Kazima. A gust of fragrant wind blew up from behind, and Shianakane hugged him from behind. Asaba Kazuma's body swayed slightly, and even though his back was turned to Shianayuin, he caught her in a quite stable posture. Amamayamai narrowed her eyes. This person's attitude towards Shianakane is completely different from his attitude towards her. Although Amamayamai didn't care that much, she felt a little unhappy for no reason. She interpreted this as a disgust for scum. But she still has a spirit of contract to some extent, and she is not as unscrupulous as the Japanese animation company that cooperates with China and the ruble-settled oil company. Calm down, cooperation with him is profitable. Amamayamai, show your strength, this person is deliberately making you angry. If the cooperation collapses, you will not only lose your body, but also other benefits. Amamayamai's silver teeth were almost broken. The place where you and Amamayamai met was the school cafeteria. It's almost time to go to class, and there is no one else in the school cafeteria. Sitting here now are the 3 privileged students of Hakuin High School, the unquestionable number 1 in the 3rd grade, the newly promoted number 1 in the 2nd grade, and Miss Genji, who was the number 1 before the 2nd grade. The 3 of you are among the few privileged students of Bien High School, but the atmosphere here is a bit subtle at this time. You talk to Shianauman about the recent events with a gentle expression, and introduce Amamayamai, your unreasonable partner. Shianauman gently leaned on Yuri, with a smile on her face, and swore ownership to Amamayamai. As for Amamayamai, Amamayamai quietly took off her shoes and stepped on your feet with her feet wearing black stockings. You are very unhappy about this and decide to give her some color you choose. Let Shianauman sit down, lift up Amamayamai's skirt, and start a mixed doubles match between husband and wife. Hold Shianauman, then took off her shoes and put them into Amamayamai's JK skirt. Hold both Shianauman and Amamayamai into his arms and say you came at the right time. Free simulation. Asaba Kazuma? Is there any option? Chienu Kazuma didn't want to speak. The option is the death option. If you really want to do this, I'm afraid you have to let Hien awaken the special XP first. That's not right. With Hien's character, what kind of situation would it take for someone to be willing to do this? You might not do this even if Amamayamai almost had her house stolen, right? Option 2 is probably the only option that can be chosen. Although such an operation is also very dangerous, when holding Hien, Hien has a blind spot in his vision. As long as it is hidden, it will definitely. Well, Hien may not be able to catch him on the spot. The option cannot be selected at all. There is no close relationship between the two of them. If they really want to do this. How is a song sung? Send, 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 baby baby baby. This is no longer an experimental Shura field, it is a direct speed pass simulation. Change the number and restart immediately. Choice, this degenerate line is really getting more and more depraved, and it is really playable. You thought about it and decided to teach Amamayamai a profound lesson. You took Shianakane over and hugged her in your arms. Shianakane's face turned red and she didn't resist. She wants to swear ownership of you in front of this extremely dangerous woman, plus, after all, on the day of the cultural festival, she felt that your relationship with her had reached a higher level, and she was already your girlfriend. Be more intimate in front of others, although she is a bit shy, but if you want, she will not refuse. Unexpectedly, Amamayamai did not cause trouble at this time, but seriously talked to her about the cooperation between herself and her boyfriend. Shianayuin listened very carefully, nodding while listening and saying that this was a good choice. I don't know why, but you feel that Shianayuin is much more mature than usual today, and can give just the right opinions when talking about various business topics. There are some opinions, and she can even give you a lot of guidance, as if she has experienced it somewhere before. This surprises you, but you are just happy that your lovely senior sister has become more capable. The scene unfolds. Amamayamai held her face with her right hand, and her smile was very gentle, which was different from the expression she had when she had sex with Asaba Kazuma. Asahi Kazuma can understand how forced behavior can make her happy. The reason why she didn't break her face was because she couldn't embarrass herself and was caught. Shiina senpai and the stinky man, well, the relationship is really sweet. Amamiya Mai's expression was a little strange. She clearly felt a pair of feet on the table gently rubbing her calves, and even used her fingers to grab her stockings and slowly pull them down. She raised her head and looked at Asahi Kazuma with a vicious look. This person has a bad character. After all, we have a cooperative relationship with him, but he really doesn't give his partners any face. Kinya Kazuma said lazily, of all the people I have worked with, you are the only one I don't want to give you any face at all. Shiina Kane gently patted Asaba Kazuma's hand. Amamiya senpai is a girl, at least be polite to her. Kinya Kazuma shook his head. Who would take off her shoes and step on his feet with black stockings? This kind of unfair behavior that trapped him must be severely retaliated. So his feet had quietly penetrated into Amamiya Mai's JK skirt without Shiina Yui knowing. Amamiya Mai was shocked and lowered her left hand quietly, blocking her movement. This person is really determined to retaliate. After being teased by me, will he be teased back? Amamiya Mai was so angry that her teeth itched, but she couldn't say anything more. After all, she was the one who started the trouble. But even if she was the first to cause trouble, she still had a reason. She was living a good life, but she was suddenly kidnapped by a stinky man. After one night, such and such things, everything that should happen happened, and the normal gameplay has been experienced after that. This unspeakable shame could not be vented. Even in order to obtain enough benefits, you have to cooperate with this person. She hates it so much. I wish I could find an opportunity to take revenge on him anytime. I hate myself even more for being so powerless, yet he caught me in my fatal weakness. You are an unmanly guy. I have no intention of letting your girlfriend find out. Why don't you ask me to take revenge? Before Amamiya Mai could think more, Asaba Kazuma took out a piece of fabric from her skirt with a calm expression. Amamiya Mai's face turned red, and she couldn't suppress her shy look. In the end, she could only change the topic immediately, looked at Shiina Kane and said coyly. I haven't thanked Shiina senpai yet. Ah. Because of your existence, I have finally been able to live a peaceful life in the past few years. Shiina Kane was a little surprised and said, does it have anything to do with me? I don't think I have ever been in contact with Amamiya senpai. Some. Amamiya Mai blushed and said seriously. Your modified gene was detected at a medical institution owned by Genji. Genji designated your genetic talent as ultimate academic ability. And with you in front of me, I only need to show enough academic ability, and my family will regard me as a genetic talent similar to yours. Thanks to this, I have a lot less trouble. The existence of special talents such as learning ability perfectly covered up her main genetic talent. Just relying on her hidden skills, some people who wanted to attack her directly before have realized what overclocking means. Mode's repressive power. Relying on this, she survived several dangerous moments in her early years. When everyone believes that her talent is the ultimate academic ability, her talent will be hidden due to the influence of cognitive impairment. Amamiya Mai said very seriously, for people like us, it is a blessing to be able to relax for a while, so I am really grateful to you. If this bastard hadn't tricked me. She looked at Asahi Kazuma fiercely. Her vagina was already hummed by this bastard. Stop now. She was signaling with her eyes to avoid making Shiina Kane suspicious. Unexpectedly, Kinya Kazuma directly spread his hands and said, who told you that it is useless? Amamiya Mai. You know, Asaba Kazuma in the fallen line is really outrageous. Because Shiina Uman was in his arms, she couldn't see Asaba Kazuma's expression sitting in front. And what is Asaba Kazuma doing at this time? He was winking and looking playful. It's like saying, You are so useless as a woman. This made Amamayamai very angry. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. We've traveled through Tokyo, who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Xiang. Chapter 164. Amamayamai was sure that she had never experienced such great humiliation in her life. All along, even during the period when Genji was most careful to survive, her appearance was her biggest weapon to gain tolerance from others. And now, she was actually being ridiculed by a man who had tasted herself. What a humiliation! But for a moment she had no way to refute. If she were an ordinary person, she would probably coldly sarcastically say the grapes are sour if they can't eat them. If Asaba Kazuma hadn't touched her before, she might have said stubbornly, "Have you tasted it?" But the problem is, she has met Shianakian and that unknown girl, but Yukiko is very competitive. She is really a beauty that normal people may never see in their life. She is not talking nonsense. Under normal circumstances, without the addition of makeup and beauty, the scarcity of beauties in this world is unimaginable to ordinary people. If it's just a good-looking face, then that's it. A group of them will pop up from time to time. If all the factors such as body shape, slender legs, overall harmony, and temperament are added together, then the possibility of reaching this level is no longer a question of whether it is low or not. Basically equal to zero. For example, the little beauty she met at the school gate before was a freak she had rarely encountered in her life. Trivia: reality is not like novels. There are beautiful girls who are almost perfect in all aspects. Most of the time, if you want to have a good body, white skin, and beauty, you have to spend money, time, and energy. In exchange for it, Asahi Kazuma had been in contact with a white and beautiful woman in her previous life. The amount of money she spent on skincare every day was really not a small amount. She even hired a personal trainer to train her body and keep her body in perfect shape. In other words, even if you see a beautiful woman with excellent appearance, temperament, and good figure in reality, there is a high probability that she did not look like this naturally, but was piled up with money. At the connection between the palmaris brevis muscle and the forearm, are there any friction marks left after typing on the keyboard for a long time or writing vigorously? Are there obvious wrinkles and dull skin color at the elbows? Is it because of the long-term fitness recovery that while gaining a good waist and peach buttocks, Yukiko's beauty has plummeted? Even if you exercise, you can't get a good waist and peach butt. The above are all good criteria for judging whether a woman is pampered or not. Of course, some people may say, don't Japanese teachers also look beautiful on their covers? You also said it was the cover, but when you actually clicked on it, there was a cover scam, which was about acting with added special effects. You can't even tell how many special effects they added to the film. Some people may also say that there are so many girls practicing dancing who have graceful postures. This is true, the person's posture is indeed beautiful, provided that she does not take off her shoes. If you are the kind of dancer who just plays around and forgets about it, your posture will basically remain original, but it may not necessarily be graceful. If your goal is to become a formal dancer, you should control your food intake when practicing dancing when you are young, in order to avoid body shape deformation. After practicing dancing for a long time, your feet will be more or less deformed, among which ballet is the most obvious. A batch of shoes, after taking off their shoes, they are really a bit out of shape. I hope you can hold it in your hands and play with it carefully. It's very beautiful and makes you think a little too much. That's why Amamayamai was so surprised when she saw the unknown girl at the school gate. She could tell that the girl was not the kind of person whose family was very wealthy, and even had a cowardice and fear of the outside world on her face. From all aspects, she was obviously not the kind of flawless beauty she thought she could be. Girl a creature. But God loves that girl so much. Even without the guidance of a professional body coach, the details of the easy-to-wear parts of the body that are still white without the use of expensive cosmetics, the perfect figure and the eye-catching Yukiko. Even though there is no exquisite workmanship, the moment she looks back, her long hair spreads out, bringing with it all kinds of charm. She is truly an alien among aliens. It's different from Shianauman, and it's even different from Amamiyamai. This is a flower of wealth that thrives despite being born in an ordinary family. Actually, Amamiyamai has always had a feeling that if Shianakane doesn't take action, she will be even more uncomfortable in the future if the girl approaches Asaba Kazuma before she does. She is a very contradictory person, like the kindness that Shianakane doesn't know about, she will remember it and is willing to give her and you sincere blessings. It's a pity that you failed to live up to her expectations when she knew that you had another girl. She was furious but had no right to interfere, so she chose to use a clever way to make things go in the direction she expected, then just let that girl give up on her own initiative. She rightly believes that a clean girl like Ishihara is not suitable for dating you. Your style will make her suffer in this life. And Shianauman doesn't look like she's willing to let go. If someone really wants to quit, at least Ishihara will be less hurt by quitting, so that Amamiyamai can also fulfill her benefactor, the union between Shianauman and you. Unfortunately, she has never experienced what you have experienced after all. Your left hand tightly grasps the lifeline of a girl, and your right hand is ready to push away the birdcage that imprisons another girl at any time, no matter which one it is related to the future between the two girls. You don't want to accept the scene of them sinking. Amamiyamai has an idea, but you don't allow it. If Amamiyamai hadn't realized this problem before, now she finally realizes your determination. When she asked you why you chose to become a Chable, you gave her an interesting reply. I choose to continue to expand my career and become a Chable, not because I want money, but because I hope that I can have choices when I want to make a choice, instead of letting others choose for me, so that I can choose when I want to. You can protect the people you protect, instead of just asking for forgiveness from others. Your eyes are cold and solemn. Amamiyamai believes it. She admits that you are a good-looking partner. Although she doesn't like your approach and hates the choices you make, she still recognizes your ability. Asaba Kazuma was a little surprised. He suddenly realized that his understanding of Amamiyamai was biased. Perhaps because of Rina and Uman, his previous impression of Amamiyamai was more unreasonable. But Amamiyamai told him with her actual actions that she was an extremely calm person who could clearly separate herself. Even calmed down a bit. Asahi Kazuma is obviously split into three distinct parts in her case. As a business partner, she still trusts her abilities, although she has not tested her actual scientific research level yet. If she wants to strengthen this point, she needs to go to Asaba Kazuma to collect relevant results later. As a partner, she believes that her character and ethics will make her a trustworthy partner, and perhaps she will have a pleasant career run-in with her. As the person in charge of firepower, she thought that she was just greedy for her body and was despicable. Moreover, he is always tough-talking, and his efforts in these few sports have not been less than usual. I'm afraid that I have already regarded myself as a heartless scum, just waiting for a realistic toy. But no matter what, this was the result Asahi Kazuma expected. His eyes continued to look at the simulated text. I don't know how much information I can discover about the Shura field between Rina and Kian in this woman's simulation. But the next moment, the content at the beginning of the simulated text surprised him. The relationship between you and Ishihara was not hidden for long by chance. Lily Garcia discovered that the relationship between you and Shianauman was too close, and it went far beyond the scope of classmates. She felt very unworthy of her good friend, so she took the initiative to ask about the situation after class. Your reply made her very silent. She told you that she would not gossip with Shianakian, but if someone asked if so, she will tell the truth. You smiled and told her it didn't matter, and said that he had already made up his mind to be judged by others. On that day, Hayakawa Haruna found you, but it was not because of your Shuro field matter, but because a professor from the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Tokyo came to the school to look for you. Only then did you know that the paper you submitted to Nature was approved. The next day, under the guidance of the old professor, you revised and sorted out your manuscript focusing on the application and expansion direction of the biomedical field. You gave a systematic theoretical explanation of the relevant technologies, and published the relevant research according to the Lancet. Borrowing the research results of your future self, you were suddenly in the limelight. An invitation letter like snowflakes was delivered to your desk. You ignored it and instead focused your attention on Shianayuin, inviting Shianayuin to join you. Let's carry out relevant research together. You are unwilling to appropriate the research results that belong to Shianakian unless necessary. You, sons, consciously guide Shianakian to develop in a specific research direction. I wonder if it is your misunderstanding. You always feel that Shiana in this life is Hian's research and development speed is much faster than during previous simulations. You attributed this to the fact that Shianayuin's previous research was slow because there was no specific direction. Shianayuin never refused your request and honestly followed the path you pointed out in the love simulation. At the same time, after a month of adaptation, Ishihara Rina is finally able to accompany you in the animation studio to carry out animation-related matters throughout the process. Now that you have become the owner of the animation studio for more than a month, you are very satisfied and plan to continue to expand the animation studio for the second time according to the previous development path. When the simulation content continued to this point, Asahi Kazuma was really shocked. It's not because Shiana Uman's research ability has been further improved, or because Rina Ishihara can work with him, but why did he suddenly become the president of the animation studio? If he read it correctly, only 1.5 months have passed since the time shown on the timeline of this dating simulation. And he actually became the boss of the animation studio a month ago. Doesn't that mean that he will have completely taken over the animation studio within a week at the latest? But that's not important. What he needs to pay attention to is another part. It can be said that Hian's relevant scientific research trends can be traced. It can even be said that as long as she follows the footsteps of her and his development in the previous life, it will soon reach an astonishing height. On the contrary, the animation studio is a bit embarrassed. If Asaba Kazuma had a high desire for the animation studio before, and considering his own living conditions, the animation studio could become his largest capital operations center in the short term, then the situation has changed somewhat now. He concentrated on the text simulation that followed. A month ago, the senior executives of Animation Studio felt that they could no longer keep up with the times. They realized that the Animation Studio's ability to successfully produce a hit work this time had nothing to do with old things like them, but more to do with your technical ability. Considering that they will continue to be in charge of Animation Studio, they still have to bear relevant risks in order to prevent themselves from living in a situation where the company may collapse at any time in the future. As industry veterans, they decisively chose to entrust Animation Studio to you. However, as a price, all the related funds you earn through reincarnation of the succubus will be converted into funds to purchase the animation studio, and continue to inject funds into the animation studio. You are a little shocked. It's not because the price is too expensive. On the contrary, the price is too cheap. It can be said that the senior management of the animation studio really have expectations for Li. They have given a job that is worthy of them effort without hurting your fundamental price. You readily agreed, which means that you directly skipped the preliminary preparations. Although you will not be able to come up with enough funds for activities in the short term, you are indeed no longer restricted in the field of animation. More importantly, you are actually not that short of money now. Half a month ago, you met with Amamayamai to discuss cooperation matters. That night, Amamayamai showed an extremely determined attitude and did not think that you could successfully develop a qualified path in the field of cultural and creative products. The final result is that you use a hearty victory to make her prostrate herself under your genes, and in the end can only cry out the words only once in a sob. Your controllable funds are improved. Now, in the first month after taking over the animation studio, you officially announced the next two projects that the animation studio will carry out simultaneously. The first project was called Cyberpunk Edgewalker. He used his superb persuasion skills to get a certain cyber game manufacturer to abandon his shoddy script and choose a story script that had almost nothing to do with the game content. It will be your first shot in the industry. The second project, it was a project filled with countless controversies, but it was not lacking in fun. In the parallel world of Blue Star, Animation Studio almost made a comeback with this work. This project is called Eye Pushing Child. An evil smile appeared on the corner of your mouth. If Cyberpunk Edgewalker is the first gate where you extend your tentacles into the gaming field, then Children Eye Pushed is your practice of fraud start. You know, in this world, there is no original comic book of the child Eye Pushed. The audience has no idea what they are going to experience next. That would be a deception in the name of love. Some people will say that it is a work that has been followed by countless people in short videos. Some people will say that the mother of the brother and sister heroines, Hoshino Ai, is very unqualified. They will even ridicule the show for its incorrect views, but aside from those who have not yet seen it, from the beginning, all the malice added to it, this series undoubtedly takes the gimmick to the extreme. Even the Up Music Idol, accompanied by a highly fraudulent MV, became the fastest song in Japan's history to be played over 100 million times. Even before others could criticize it, it began to crazily refresh similar Japanese songs on major platforms. The record of the theme music can be called crazy. Not to mention anything else, just this huge publicity power makes you unable to refuse it. You have to leave an impression on the world. Perhaps Animation Studio's animation may not be a masterpiece, but it must be the kind of work that never makes people feel that it is not fun. Now, it's time for the wind to blow. We've traveled through Tokyo. Who still wants to simulate love? Author, Fei Se Hui-Xiang. Chapter 165. The first one to complete production is Cyberpunk Edgewalker. You know that the animation studio is just a knife for you to complete the internal cycle of the big IP, not the final resort. It is to give the fans and game manufacturers a hint. First, our animation studio can tell good stories. It turns out that your strategy was very successful. You took Rina Ishihara to work overtime in the animation studio to make animations. Due to the reference experience of previous animations, you made animations very efficiently, except for the fact that you had to bring these light lily lovers with you at the beginning. The original painters changed the painting style and did not encounter too many difficulties. Your awareness of game character design has improved. Your painting style has been further extended. Ishihara Rina gradually gets used to working beside you when she has the strength and relies on the boss of the company behind her. Then all she sees is goodwill. The kind-hearted Ishihara Rina quickly gained the love of many people in the company, and they also highly recognized the strength of this little girl who was in pairs with their boss all day long. Sometimes, with the blessing of multiple genetic talents, after you finish the work in advance, you will leave the project team and come to the office of your former boss. Now this is your private space. Generally speaking, Ishihara Rina will always finish the work at hand as soon as possible after you leave, and go to the boss's office to report to you on the overall project progress, and you have already tasted the meaty taste on Amamayamai. After all, I don't have as strong willpower as before, so sometimes after reporting on work, Ishihara Rina always feels a little sore in her jaw. Asaba Kazuma. Wait, dating sim, what did you skip? Why is it that when it's time to expand on the memory scene, a sentence or two of text is skipped? Kinya Kazuma watched the bite flash by with a look of sorrow and anger. He sighed and could only comfort himself. Some things were more fulfilling if done in reality. Is he so hypocritical and excessive? Directly in the office? But after thinking about it, the scene where Sister Rina was hiding under the boss's chair, giving him a work report in a somewhat awkward and confused manner, hey, it seems pretty good. You must find a way to try it in reality. But Cyberpunk Edgewalker? After all, it is an animation project chosen based on its own concept, which obviously has special needs. This time is different from Japan. In the previous life, and many anime have disappeared. Among so many high-quality anime, Cyberpunk Edgewalker was specially selected. This is obviously to build momentum for my future games. When people mention him and the games he is preparing to transport, fans can at least immediately think of whether the games he made by Isaba Kazuma are good or not, but the promotional video is definitely awesome. Is Cyberpunk 2077 a good game? Yes. So is it a highly completed game? Everyone who understands understands. This is a game that everyone had high expectations for, but actually made many people feel disappointed after it was released. It can be said that compared with the high expectations at the time, it ended somewhat poorly after it was finally launched. However, the flame that was about to be extinguished suddenly sparkled again after encountering the copywriting done by Trigger Agency. Let's just say how many people got to know this game again because of Edgewalker, and led new and old players to play Adam Hammer. Although in the game, Adam Hammer has nothing to do with Rebecca, many players became angry after Adam Hammer turned into Rebecca-chan in the animation. Whether it's animation, comics, novels, movies, or games, provoking players' emotions is always the best way to highlight gameplay and storytelling. Cyberpunk Edgewalker did it. As a result, there was a subtle complementarity between animation and games, which can be called the best promotional film for Cyberpunk 2077. Think about it this way. Isaba Kazuma seemed to have guessed what she wanted to do in the love simulation. Sure enough, the scene that Isaba Kazuma expected appeared in the simulated text. Cyberpunk Edgewalker has become a hit. You have already predicted that Edgewalker will become a hit, so you have divided the relevant extended copyright ownership of the animation with the production company behind the game in advance. Few of the animations adapted from the game are well done. Cyberpunk 2077 just wants to open up new markets through animation, and does not have much expectations for the ownership of the copyright related to the animation itself. You relied on the information gap to obtain the extended copyright ownership in advance at a price that the game officials thought was a bit excessive. They are laughing behind your back as you are a small company, and you actually think that you can become popular by overestimating your capabilities. If you don't have expectations, you won't be disappointed. They make it easy, and you laugh behind your back because they don't understand what a sexy operation is. In fact, by the time Cyberpunk Edgewalker was released, the game officials already felt something was slightly wrong. The quality seemed to far exceed their expectations, but they were not too angry because it was an animation studio. People spend extra energy to forcefully improve the quality. Nowadays, Cyberpunk Edgewalker has caused quite a good response in the animation community. Those old fans who used to expect more from animation studios and were more interested in cute works were surprised. A bunch of newcomers began to pay attention to the studio company. Someone discovered that the reincarnated succubus animation that became a hit a few months ago was actually produced by this company from the inherent label of cute daily life, love, and even King Beifeng. It suddenly changed to what it is now. The change is really too big. And you, the boss of the animation studio, the absolute technical strength of the animation studio is now completely out of the circle after winning 2 consecutive victories. Popular cartoonist, top copywriter, and the most powerful newcomer supervisor, snowflake-like honors have fallen on you. The popularity has not subsided, and Edgewalker has not finished playing. You are at the peak of the popularity, announcing to everyone that the production of the new December series The Children I Pushed has been completed. As soon as the news came out, everyone was shocked. The animation studio is a small workshop after all. While producing a high-quality animation, it was also starting a new project at the same time. Now that December is coming, the animation studio has not mentioned any mention of producing an original animation before. Now that The Kid I Pushed is released, you swear to tell everyone that this animation is no less good than Edgewalker, an interesting new show. Without any knives, it is a rare healing show. The most important thing is that the first episode is as long as 1 hour. Afterwards, Daisuke Hiramaki came forward, and everyone knew that these two projects were planned by Animation Studio at the same time. The former was mainly to further build up its reputation. The reason is that after Animation Studio, it will be closely related to the SLG game group that has continued to heat up recently. Yulu officially reached a strategic cooperation. This time Cyberpunk Edgewalker is a test before the high integration of games and animation. Now it seems that the effect is very significant. So far, The Children I Push has become a hit overnight under your painstaking management. Of course, while others are still paying attention to your achievements in the animation career, the laboratory that Amamiyamai invested in you has completed the first stage of technical demonstration. The gene stabilizing reagent that was born has gone through Genji's internal research. After the experiment, it caused a new sensation at a higher level. On this day, you and Shianayuin have completed today's experiment and are preparing to go back to rest. The scene unfolds. Asaba Kazuma and Shianayuin left the laboratory, and the two of them were walking slowly under the moonlight. Asaba Kazuma held Shianayuin's hand and whispered, "Senior, your rate of progress is really daunting." Asahi Kazuma was not joking. He always felt that his Mrs. Asahi seemed to have undergone some subtle changes in some way. In his impression, her character at this time was still relatively immature. But now she behaves more maturely, or, she is trying to become more mature. Perhaps because he was holding hands and feeling a little shy, Shianakian's voice was very soft, "Thank you for your hard work. Once the results of this research come out, I'm afraid you will be in the limelight again." Kinyo Kazuma shook his head and said, "No, we are in the limelight together. This time you may become the goddess of scientific research." Shianakian shook his head and said, "I don't like this title." Kinyo Kazuma was confused. Why? Because this title is unlucky. People who are dubbed the goddess of scientific research will often have some bad rumors later. The most important thing is that there are still many people who believe that the rumors are true, Shianakian said with a smile. Qian Yufengjian thought for a moment, and it was true. The gene stabilizing reagent you made this time is a little strange. Shianakian quickly changed the topic. Kinyo Kazuma frowned. What's weird? I originally thought that this gene stabilizing reagent of yours was prepared to protect yourself. Shianakian smiled and said, but now it seems that you need to use it to help others. Qian Yufengma paused for a moment, the confusion in his eyes flashed, and finally whispered, I have a friend, her life is being threatened, I don't dare to bet. What about you? Don't you have to worry about problems with your adjusted genes? Shianakian said helplessly. Asaba Kazuma was even more confused. Why did he think there was something wrong with his adjustment genes? But he still gave an explanation. There are basically no problems on my side. What I have to consider now are other factors. Hearing Asaba Kazuma's words, Shianakian's eyes instantly turned to him. Are you sure? Well, it's all settled. Shianayuin's expression was a little subtle, as if she had seen something new and incomprehensible. On the contrary, Asahi Kazuma was a little confused. I didn't expect that. Not only did you absorb knowledge quickly, but you also completely understood the details of the experiment. From absorbing an unfamiliar theory, to understanding, to being able to apply it, and finally to thoroughly mastering it, there are several distinct stages. Asaba Kazuma originally thought that Shianayuin was at the third stage at most, but now it seems that she has completely absorbed and understood it. But if she had already achieved this level, why did she seem to be inconsistent with the characteristics of this stage during the specific experimental sessions? It's like a player who deliberately controlled his score in the exam. Kinyo Kazuma shook his head, throwing this strange speculation to the back of his mind. Is it that girl? The girl I heard about in school before, Shianakian said again. Kinyo Kazuma pursed her lips and finally nodded. This gene-stabilizing reagent was prepared for Rina Ishihara. If the original time does not change, Rina will face the first catastrophe in her life in more than a year at most. That's why he produced the first perfectly adapted gene stabilizing reagent after the basic experimental situation was stable. You must know that this is not the earliest gene stabilizing reagent that Tatsuo Fujiki could prepare with extremely low-level side effects. It is based on the genetic equation, with Ishihara-Rina's genes as the core, and was produced at a huge cost. Gene stabilization reagents. It can be said that with this reagent, Rina can be determined without any risk. This reagent is the limit that current human technology can achieve. A gene stabilizing reagent that can adapt to 2 adjustment genes. If the experiment was not invested by the Genji group, Asaba Kazuma had no need for trial and error, and the investment cost was much less. He would not have dared to engage in this thing. I originally thought that it would take some time for Hien to understand this thing, but she didn't expect that she could see it at a glance. You are really gentle, Kazuma, but such gentleness is really a heavy burden for those who like you. Shiina Kane said in a low voice, her eyes turning red as she spoke. Asahi Kazuma could only hug her gently and say, "Sorry, it's my problem." At this moment, a luxury car suddenly stopped in front of the two of them. Asaba Kazuma narrowed her eyes and subconsciously reached out to protect Shiina Yuan. Shiina Kien looked at his back with a complicated expression, feeling a little sad for some reason. Obviously he originally belonged to her alone, but now someone wants to come over and break up with her. She was actually thinking about leaving directly, but as soon as she thought about this possibility, she couldn't breathe, especially since his attitude of protecting her has not changed until now. How could she bear to leave? Why don't you just pretend to be confused? But she soon stopped thinking about it. Because one car after another stopped around the luxury car, many bodyguards in black suits began to get out one after another. Kinya Kazuma stretched out his hand to protect her behind him, narrowed his eyes, and a cold look flashed in his eyes. "Hien, you go first, I will find you later." Without a gun, there isn't much of a threat. "Mr. Kinyu, we don't have any malicious intentions in coming here this time." A lady got out of the car that stopped first, bowed to him, and said lightly, "Mr. Asaba, Miss Jensensen wants to talk to you about something." Qian Yufengjian said coldly, "Your posture doesn't look like you want to have a good conversation." "I'm sorry, it's because of me that the protection at home is a bit too much." A soft female voice sounded, the window of the luxury car slowly lowered, and a young girl who looked very weak sat quietly in the car. "I'm Minamoto Shinzuru. I don't know if Sister Mayumi has ever told you about me."